Chapter 2019. Zhang Yan was calculating in the hall when Jingyu came in and reported, Master God Zhao Heng is here to pay his respects. Zhang Yan, call him in. Not long after, a handsome man wearing a crown and a star, sun, and moon emblem walked into the hall. He cupped his hands and bowed to the seat. Little God Zhao Heng pays his respects to the Grand Supreme. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, Master God need not be so courteous. Please take a seat and talk. Zhao Heng bowed and said, There is no place for a little god in front of the Grand Supreme. Zhang Yan, Master God, why are you here? Zhao Heng bowed again and said, A few days ago, my subordinate, evergreen border guarding god, almost harmed the people of the Grand Supreme for his own benefit. It was my fault for not being strict enough. I am here to ask for forgiveness from the Grand Supreme. Zhang Yan smiled and said, I see. Master God upholds the righteousness of heaven and earth and has his own rules. Whether it is wrong or how it is judged, I don't need to ask. You only need to remember that a big tree has withered branches and should be pruned from time to time. Zhao Heng said solemnly, Yes, I will be vigilant and reflect on myself. There will be no such thing again. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and did not speak anymore. Zhao Heng bowed and left the hall. When he was outside, he felt relieved. As a divine master, a single word from him could make billions of gods bow their heads. But just now, in Qinghuan Palace, everyone was trembling with fear. Although Zhang Yan didn't speak harshly or punish him, Kiki felt an invisible pressure weighing down on her heart. This was normal. No matter how high his status was outside, in front of the Grand Supreme Taoist ancestor, he was no different from an ordinary person. He sighed. Other than Qinghuan Palace, he still had to go to the places where Yuanzun was to avoid being disrespectful. He did not forget to bid farewell to Jingyu and flew away in a ray of light. After sitting in the hall for a long time, Zhang Yan suddenly had a thought. A moment later, there was a flash of light in the hall and 5 figures appeared at the bottom of the stairs. They all bowed to the jade platform and said, Greetings, Grand Elder. The divine wills of the 5 divisions of the Great Trout, including Swan and I, were summoned by him and were now here. With the elimination of the big trout, the restrictions set by the previous Almighty also disappeared. The remaining 5 sets of divine wills woke up one after another. At this moment, they had all regained their freedom and no longer had to worry about being annexed. Zhang Yan's eyes landed on the 5 of them and said, When you are in Busu, there is no need to leave. Later, without my orders, you all are not to act rashly. Do you understand? The 5 of them knew that they had been exposed. If this god wanted to deal with them, they would not be able to Shen, they would not be able to leave. God, Shen would Yen, Shen God, Shen, Yen and God, Shen. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and waved his sleeves. Go. The 5 of them bowed again and retreated. After their consciousness returned to their bodies, they followed Zhang Yan's instructions. Under their cooperation, it didn't take long for the 5 chaos heavens to enter Busu's great heavens. When Zhang Yan saw this, he summoned the Weili and shrouded it, causing this person's body to merge with Busu. From now on, this person could only be considered as an ordinary world in Busu and could not leave at will. After doing this, he felt that Busu Tian seemed to have gotten rid of some hindrance. He suddenly felt a sense of clarity and emptiness. It was obvious that the removal of the 5 spheres of chaos and the removal of the great power of the predecessors was beneficial to his control over Busu Tian. At the same time, many worlds appeared in front of him. They were like stars, decorating Busu, but at the same time, they floated outside. He looked at them and pondered. Strictly speaking, these could all be considered divine wills. Busu Tian was a place where the essence of creation was gathered. This essence of creation was also divided into yin and yang, and there was also a distinction between void and condensation. The yang qi was the Busu Tian that he saw now, while the majority of the yin qi was nowhere to be found. Only a very small portion formed the divine wills. In the past, he thought that as long as it was a divine wills, it should have been opened up by the great sages or infected by the Weili. But now, it seemed that this was not the case. There were also some ownerless lands here. The reason why he didn't notice it before was because there were no great sages or whaley among them. This was like a drop of water mixed into the ocean. It was too small and easy to ignore, but now he could see it clearly. He thought for a while and cast his mind to one of them. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in this divine wills. He saw that the sky was blue and the water was green. The colors were gorgeous, and the ground was covered with flower petals. The trees were lush, and the leaves were verdant. When the wind blew, it swayed and made an ear-pleasing sound. There was also the strong fragrance of incense, which was pleasant to the mind. Zhang Yan sensed for a while. This beautiful scenery was not unique to the place in front of him, but it was everywhere. He had been to many void realms, and just from the surface, this was an extremely rare place of beauty. It was as if all the good things in the world were entrusted to this place. If there were no accidents, this should be the realm of mortal desires recorded by the predecessors. Bu Su Tian's 3-era calendar was rumored to be the result of the wishes of the people. Thus, a mental world appeared in the heavens. Within this world, there were all sorts of beautiful things that were in accordance with the wishes of the people. Mortals who came here could live forever and never grow old. They could enjoy all sorts of pleasures. In contrast, there was also a realm of evil, where all the ugly and evil thoughts in the hearts of people could be found. However, in his opinion, mortals did not have any divine abilities or whaley abilities, so it was impossible to rely on the power of will to create a realm like this. The truth was that this realm had first appeared, and then it had been infected by the desires of the people. Just now, this was what had happened. There was also a similar example. In the mountain and sea realm, Bo Bai and Bo Xian, if they did not have true yang quintessence energy, then no matter how much you prostrated yourself in worship, you would never have been able to become true gods. The more a place was like this, the more likely it was to be infected and used by external forces. That entity had not yet arrived, and had only used its aura to stir up trouble. Thankfully, it had not affected the muddy heavens. However, if the muddy heavens were affected as well, then it was impossible to say how much more trouble it would cause. Therefore, in order not to cause any problems for himself, he had to resolve this matter as soon as possible. Either he sent his own magical power into the muddy heavens, or he could simply dispel them. After a moment of thought, he willed it, and the entire world shattered, transforming into a precious jade which fell into his hand. After all, it was something that the people had entrusted their hearts to, and it would be a pity to destroy it. Therefore, he planned to combine it with Bu Su Tian, and then dispel the muddy heavens before handing it over to Zhao Heng to deal with. He flicked his sleeve, then took a step forward. This time, he was in the middle of another uninhabited muddy heavens. However, although there were no almighty whaley beings stationed here, that did not mean that no living beings had ever been here. What he saw was the skeleton of a great rock, which had fallen down into the heavens and was gradually becoming one with them. The living beings of the void were originally born from the void, and in the end, they perished in the void. Logically speaking, there should be no remains of these skeletons. Therefore, this great rock must have been unable to find a way out after arriving here, and was restricted by the world itself, which was why it became like this. Similarly, this world was originally empty, but after being infected by the aura of this great rock, it gradually merged with it. Zhang Yan calculated for a moment. Although this great rock was not the ancestral rock, its relationship was not far. It should be the offspring of the ancestral rock. Due to a very coincidental reason, it had come here, and there was no external force driving it. This place was useless to him, but for the disciples below, it was not completely without benefits. He immediately took out a spell, and under his whaley control, this muddy heavens, like the world formed by the 5 tribes of the great trout, ended its free state, and merged with Bu Su Tian. From then on, it could no longer escape. With another flick of his finger, a token fell into the Qinghuan Palace. Then, with a split of his consciousness, his body scattered, and he was thrown into all the unowned muddy heavens. In the side hall, Lu Yinyi was cultivating. When she saw the token, she took it and looked at it. Then she immediately called for her 4 juniors. Wei Zihong said, "Senior sister, You have called us here. Is there anything that Master wants us to do? Lu Yenny said, Junior brothers, follow me to a boundary, and you will know once you see it. She held the token and silently circulated her mana. In an instant, a realm gate opened, and she went first. Tian Kuan, Jiang Jing, Wei Zihong, and Yuan Jinking followed suit and came to an unfamiliar boundary. Wei Zihong identified it and raised his eyebrows. Could this be the Kuan realm? Lu Yenny said, Junior brother, it is not wrong to say that this is the Kuan realm. This place is very strange. As long as we use our wishes, we can create a giant Kuan that is most compatible with us. Wei Zihong was interested and tried to visualize it. After a while, he saw a giant Kuan appear from the void. It was only the size of an arm, and it swam around him intimately. From time to time, it would even nudge him with its head. He smiled and said, Interesting. Jiang Zheng sensed the aura of the giant Kuan and was surprised to find that it was not inferior to theirs. Obviously, it was not a lie when they said that it was compatible with them. He said, This place is very useful. Lu Yenny said, Just now, Master has issued a decree. From now on, this world will be under our control. If junior brothers have no objections in the future, if our disciples make great contributions, or if they cultivate to the mortal transformation realm, they will be rewarded with this place. Zhang Yan did not care about how his disciples would deal with the Kuan realm. After he cast his consciousness over, he quickly swept through all the ownerless heavens that had not been infected by the almighty beings. However, he knew that as long as Bu Su heaven still had Yin Qi, new heavens would gradually be formed. It was fine as long as it did not become an obstacle for him now. Once his goal was achieved, he would not care about any changes. Right now, he could sense that there were still a few more heavens outside of Bu Su heaven. He was sure that these were the places where the almighty Wei Li resided. Therefore, he could not enter them for the time being unless he could connect with Bu Su heaven. Just now, he could find the door. In reality, even if these heavens existed, they would not be able to stop him from controlling Bu Su heaven. However, if there were Wei Li obstructions, they might be able to delay the process. After careful calculation, it would only be 20 to 30 years before the closest heavens would arrive. Chapter 2020. 10 years passed in the Kunshi continent. In the Yaoyin clan scripture cave, Chang Zai sat in front of a table, reading the cultivation notes left behind by his predecessors under the light of a pearl hanging from the ceiling. Occasionally, he would pick up a brush and write down some insights on the tablet. As he was lost in thought, an attendant suddenly came in and whispered, Peak Lord Chang, the sect leader has sent someone to invite you. Chang Zai put down the scripture and said, All right, I'll go right away. He tidied up a bit and left the scripture cave. He took a magical boat to the highest palace platform in the sect, where he reported to the sect leader and entered the grand palace. Wei Zihong was standing in front of a map. When he saw Chang Zai enter, he waved at him and said with a smile, Junior brother, come over here. Chang Zai bowed and looked curiously at the map. Sect leader Wei, what kind of map is this? Wei Zihong said, This is a congratulatory gift that your senior brothers and sisters and I prepared for Master's Tao. It's called the Myriad Worlds Heavenspan Map. It contains all of the records of heaven and earth, as well as all of the local scenery. The map in front of you is the one I'm responsible for drawing. He turned and smiled. Junior brother, as Master's disciple, when your memories are restored, you will also be responsible for a portion of it. Chang Zai couldn't help but look at the map carefully. After a while, he felt dizzy and couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Wei Zihong smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Junior brother, your cultivation base isn't high enough right now, so there's no need to force yourself. When your cultivation base is higher, it won't be too late to do this. This map is for all of us to complete together, so there's no need to rush. After saying this, he changed the topic. Junior brother, you haven't been to the mountain and sea realm yet, have you? Chang Zai's eyes lit up. He was born in the Kunshi continent, and after joining the Yaoyin clan, he learned that the Greater Sect and the Bright Nether Lake were both in the mountain and sea realm. However, he had never had the opportunity to go there. Crossing worlds was very attractive to him, so he said, "Sect leader Wei, will you allow me to travel to other realms?" Crossing worlds required the use of a realm gate set up by an almighty being. Even if a cultivator's cultivation base hadn't reached the Grotto Heaven realm, they could use it freely. Wei Zihong laughed heartily. Always practicing cultivation in the sect isn't very appropriate. The disciples of the Mountain and Sea Realms' 3 sects are competing in magical combat, and I happen to have some business to attend to in the Mountain and Sea Realm. In the future, he said, in the Xianyuan sect grand competition and sect competition, junior brother, you should watch them all. Junior brother, he said, junior sect, and sect. Sect Dao, sect. Z, sect Changdao Chung. He knew that blindly cultivating behind closed doors was very boring. There were very few people who could concentrate on something just by sitting there. Exchanging pointers with others of the same generation and tempering each other was the correct path. At this moment, a big Kuan with a big head and small body swam in from outside. It was carrying a white cloud under its body. It swam around Wei Zihong's side, looking very happy. "What is that, sect leader Wei?" Changdao asked. Wei Zihong laughed. "It's a giant Kuan," Wei Zihong said with a smile. "It's a creature from the void. If you make some progress in your cultivation, I can take you to a place where you can choose one." The giant Kuan was a spirit of the void. Even if it was still in its infancy, it would at least be at the Grotto Heaven level. It wasn't something that Chang Zai could control at his current cultivation level. Even if the giant Kuan was willing to follow him, it wouldn't be of any benefit to his cultivation. Hence, he wouldn't give it to him now. Chang Dao was a bit puzzled. He wasn't an idiot, and could tell that Wei Zihong wanted him to focus on his cultivation. However, he hadn't slacked off recently. In fact, in the 10 years since he'd arrived at the Yaoyin clan, he hadn't gone out for a stroll. Wei Zihong ordered the giant Kuan to go play, then said to Chang Zai, "Junior brother, come with me." He brought Chang Zai to the back hall of the temple, where there was a realm gate. With a wave of his sleeve, the gate between the 2 worlds was opened, and he walked in. Chang Zai hurriedly followed, only to feel a blur in front of him. He found himself on a high platform, surrounded by white stone pillars supporting a magnificent dome. The front was incomparably spacious, and one could see the endless blue seawater below. A line of white waves was advancing and retreating on the moist beach sand. Wei Zihong waved his sleeve to release a flying carriage pulled by 2 dragons, saying, "The scenery here isn't bad. Junior brother, you can take a look on the flying carriage." Chang Zai followed him onto the carriage, and sat in the carriage to look at the scenery. He'd lived in the sect for a long time, and now that he saw the scenery, he couldn't help but feel at ease. About an hour later, the carriage passed through a teleportation formation, and the 2 of them landed on an island. The 3 overseas sects that were holding the competition this time were the Chongyue True Temple, the Yenzhong Temple, and the Duchen sect. Ever since the 3 sects moved to the 6 continents of the Northern Sea, they had always fought together against the foreign beasts of the sea. Their disciples often fought against demons and monsters, so their combat prowess was not weak. The competition this time was a competition between the younger generation disciples. However, because it was held once every year, it would always attract many fellow Taoists to come and watch with their disciples. So now, it was no longer just a matter of the 3 sects, and it could be considered to be a grand event from the sea. "Hey, who are those people?" Chang Zai noticed that many of the cultivators were not in human form, and many of them were outsiders with profound cultivation bases. Wei Zihong said, "They're from the 100 South Net continent." Chang Zai nodded in understanding. Ever since the cultivators of the 9 continents occupied the Mountain and Sea realm, the 100 South Net continent was the only continent that had a demon patriarch overseeing it. No wonder there were so many outsiders. He said, "It seems the 3 overseas sects don't have any sectarian bias." Wei Zihong said, "That's only natural." The previous sect leader of the Yenzhong Temple, Li Xiaomi, was a water creature who transformed into a dragon and achieved the Tao. How could he look down on outsiders and demonic cultivators? He produced a magical talisman from his sleeve. There are still a few days before the magical competition. Junior brother, feel free to walk around. I'm going to visit some old friends. I'll leave this talisman for you to protect yourself. Chang Zai took it and put it away. When he looked up, he saw that Wei Zihong had already disappeared. He turned to look at the source of the commotion. The weather was clear and the wind was warm. A wide wooden bridge stretched out over the sea, connecting dozens of islands like a string of pearls. It could accommodate several carriages traveling side by side. At the end of the bridge was a towering mountain that reached into the sea. At every point on the sea, there were huge pavilions that were hundreds of meters tall. Below the pavilions, huge whales would occasionally flip and jump. It was a majestic sight to behold. He saw that in addition to the disciples of the various sects who passed by in carriages, there were also quite a few rogue cultivators walking on the bridge. From time to time, laughter could be heard. He smiled and walked along the bridge toward the pavilions. But before he had taken a few steps, he heard someone call out to him. Startled, he turned his head and saw a young girl with plump cheeks and 2 buns of hair. She was dressed in a long skirt, and her eyes were so round that they seemed to be able to speak. However, she was a little shorter than an ordinary person, and under her feet were dense clouds that made her look like a beautiful bundle of Jiqi clouds. The young girl asked curiously, "Little brother, I saw you come with sect leader Wei. Are you a disciple of his sect?" Chang Zai was startled. When Wei Zihong came, no one noticed him, but this one could. He immediately knew that she wasn't an ordinary person and didn't dare to deceive her. He thought for a moment and said, "Not really." The young girl grunted and stared at him for a while. Then she nodded and seemed to have guessed his origin. She said, "My surname is Yang. Here, since we met, it must be fate. This is for you." She raised her wrist and tossed over a talisman. Chang Zai had been in the Yaoyin sect for a long time and naturally had some knowledge. He knew that it was best not to refuse at this time. Even if there was anything, he could go back and ask Wei Zihong about it. Therefore, he didn't hesitate at all and accepted it readily. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, senior." The young girl was very satisfied with his attitude. She waved her hand and said, "If you meet sect leader Wei, give him my regards." Before Chang Zai could respond, the young girl turned into a gust of wind and disappeared. He looked around again. None of the passers-by noticed what had happened just now. He muttered, "Do they all walk so freely?" He didn't dwell on the matter any longer and continued walking along the wooden bridge. By this time, more and more people were gathering around. Suddenly, he heard someone calling out to him. "Fellow Taoist, we rogue cultivators need to pass through several passes set up by the 3 sects to get to the sea pavilion. Why don't you come with us?" Chang Zai looked over and saw that the person calling out to him was a young cultivator, who was smiling politely at him. There were about 10 other fellow Taoists gathered around him, both men and women as well as some young people. He thought about it for a moment and realized that he could also be considered a rogue cultivator, right? Furthermore, he had come out to make friends and broaden his horizons, so he didn't refuse. He clasped his hands and smiled. "Then I'll have to trouble you all." The group of young people were very happy to see him agree and invited him over. Both sides exchanged names. They were all young people, and the difference in their cultivation bases wasn't very big, so they quickly became familiar with each other. It was only now that Chang Zai realized that this group of people didn't actually know each other. Most of them were rogue cultivators, and had gathered together to help each other out. That was the norm for rogue cultivators nowadays. What was strange to him was that some of them were not from the mountain and sea realm, but rather from the U-world heaven. The young cultivator's name was Fong Ziru, and he was very talkative. He said, "Everyone, do you know why the competition between the 3 overseas sects is so much more intense than any of the previous ones?" Someone asked, "Why?" Fong Ziru said mysteriously, "I heard that the Chongyuezhen Temple found the reincarnation of a Taoist wonderland 20 years ago. I heard that he will also participate in the competition this time. A man from the grotto heaven? Reincarnation?" The group of young people suddenly looked surprised. With their cultivation bases, the highest cultivators they could normally come into contact with were Yuanian cultivators, which was already too high to reach. Taoists like Taoist wonderlands had the power to destroy the heavens and the earth, but they usually stayed in their sects and rarely appeared. Therefore, in the eyes of rogue cultivators, they were limited to legends. As for the higher levels, they only vaguely knew that there were almighty beings up there, but they didn't know exactly what was going on. One of them had a look of longing on his face. I wonder when we'll be able to cultivate to that level. Everyone couldn't help but think about how difficult it was to cultivate step by step. They were filled with both anticipation and pressure. Some people even wondered what it would be like to stand here in a few decades or even 100 years. However, they were all young and full of vigor, so they quickly put these worries to the back of their minds. Chang Zai's heart skipped a beat, and he thought to himself, 20 years ago? No matter what, this person isn't very old. Who knows, he might be similar to me. Having reached this point in his train of thought, he suddenly felt an eagerness to give it a try. After cultivating for so long, he had always wanted to find someone powerful to compare notes with and see how far apart he was from them. If this was the reincarnation of the Taoist wonderland, he would be an excellent opponent. Chapter 2021. Feng Ziru's group of people chatted and laughed as they walked forward. Chang Zai was among them, listening to the rumors and secrets of the cultivation world along the way, and he was also very interested. Some of the rumors they spoke of were recorded in detail in the Yaoyin clan, but they were not what they said. But why did he feel that listening to these specious things was even more interesting? Not long after, the crowd arrived in front of the first barriers set up by the 3 sections. However, these barriers were not really used to stop people. They were like lantern riddles in the mortal world, only to add some fun, or to allow some cultivators who thought they had strength to compete with others of the same generation. There was no need to fight tit for tat, and it would also avoid harming harmony. If you did not want to pass through this barrier, you could fly over and no one would stop you. But if you ran away when everyone was below, it would clearly be admitting that you could not pass, and it would be inevitable that you would be looked down upon by others. The majority of the people who came to watch the competition were junior disciples, and their age was not high even for ordinary people. Naturally, they would not be willing to do such a shameful thing. Chang Zai looked around and found that most of the questions here were to test one's cultivation and ability to use spiritual power. It was not difficult, whether it was a sect disciple or a rogue cultivator, as long as one's foundation was not too bad, one could pass with some time. But there were some that required several people to work together. For example, there was a barrier that blocked the sea, and one person could not break through it. It required several people to work together to break through. It was naturally better to travel in groups, but those who came alone could only delay for a while and find others to work together. Because Feng Ziru had participated in the competition of the 3 sects before, he knew what to do, so his group easily passed through several barriers and arrived at a corridor. After passing through here, they would reach Tonghai Mountain. At this time, everyone received a jade tablet from the 3 sects deacons. On the front was the seal script of the 3 sects, and on the back was a picture of a dragon circling the clouds. The dragon's body was complete with scales and whiskers, and it looked quite exquisite. Feng Ziru reminded everyone, please do not lose this item. We are not disciples of the sect, nor do we have an elder to guide us, so we have to rely on this item to enter the Great Sea Mountains to observe the battle. Once this event is over, there will be another jade plate that will be bestowed to you. When these 2 items are combined, a technique will appear inside. If you are lucky, you may even obtain a superior technique. When everyone heard that this item was so important and that there might be a spell within it, they all exclaimed in surprise and carefully put it away. What rogue cultivators lacked the most now were not external objects, but cultivation techniques. These things could not be easily obtained. Chang Zai kept it well. Although he didn't need the spell, this item was proof and couldn't be lost. He followed the crowd and smoothly arrived at the beach outside the corridor house. When he raised his head, he couldn't help but hold his breath. Standing here, he felt the grandeur of the Great Sea Mountains, connecting the sky above and the sea below. The huge green shadow seemed like it would topple over to where he was at any time. Suddenly, there was a blur in front of him, and he felt a patch of white dots floating over from the mountains. After looking carefully, he saw that it was a flock of red-crowned cranes, each of them about 10 feet tall, and they landed lightly in front of everyone. Immediately, a cultivator flipped over and sat on it. The large crane let out a long cry, flapped its wings and flew up. Fang Ziru also said, "Everyone, this red-crowned crane will bring me inside the mountain wall. We will meet again in the mountains." Chang Zai saw that everyone was flying away on the cranes, and he also walked towards one of the red-crowned cranes. However, he felt that it was exceptionally intelligent and didn't immediately flip over and get on when he was in front of him. Instead, he cupped his hands and said politely, "Thank you, fellow Taoist." The red-crowned crane stared at him for a moment, and a gentle female voice said, "Esteemed guest, please take a seat." Chang Zai didn't find it strange. The Yaoyin clan often used these spiritual birds to travel, and it seemed that many of them had developed spiritual intelligence. When he got on the crane's back, he felt his body lighten, and then he rose into the air, heading towards the Great Sea Mountains. The red-crowned crane flew like an arrow, and after about 2 hours, just now it was close to the Great Sea Mountains, and landed on a platform outside the mountain wall. The red-crowned crane said, "Esteemed guest, just walk inside. There will be servants inside to receive you." Chang Zai thanked it, and saw that there was an open corridor on the mountain wall. On both sides, there were stone men holding lamps, and under their feet were large jade bricks. It was very smooth. He walked in, and after a moment, he passed the stone wall and came to a valley. This was a mountain within a mountain, and millions of pearls shone down like stars, illuminating all corners, as if it was a sunny day. Pavilions and temples were built along the mountain wall, climbing up layer by layer like stairs. At this moment, the talisman in his sleeve lit up and flew out by itself, and then hung motionlessly on a tower. He flew up at once, and found that it was a spacious pavilion that could accommodate more than 10 people. Inside, there were jade bead curtains and stone screens, and there were tables and mats, as well as lacquerware. All of them were painted with fish, birds, and flowers, and all of them were exquisite and gorgeous. There was already a maidservant waiting in the pavilion. Seeing him enter, she came up and bowed, saying, "Esteemed guest, would you like to change the furnishings?" "Change the furnishings?" Chang Zai asked, and found out that the people who came back to observe the Dharma came from different territories. Some might be of different species, and some might have different hobbies. If they were not satisfied with the furnishings here, they could very well change it. Although he didn't have to worry about his expenses in the Yaoyin clan, he had never been so particular about it. He waved his hand and said, "There's no need, you can all leave." The maidservant bowed and said, "Esteemed guest, you can call us if you need anything." With that, they left together. Chang Zai first went to take a bath in the earth-fire warm pool, and after he came out, he sat down on the comfortable soft couch. He could smell the fragrance of a few pots of bright flowers in the pavilion, and it was intoxicating, but he was secretly shocked. He felt that this place was very draining of his willpower. If he were to be intoxicated in this place for a long time, how much of his heart to cultivate Tao would be left? When he thought of this, he couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up and walked along a passage behind the pavilion, along a covered bridge and a plank road, and then through a curtain of waterfall. After passing through, his field of vision suddenly widened. This was an incomparably spacious cave hall, and it looked like the whole mountain leading to the sea had been hollowed out, but the inner walls formed layers of spiraling walls. No matter where you were, you could clearly see everything that was happening in the center of the cave hall. He nodded to himself. It looked like this should be the battle platform. Only such a spacious area could accommodate cultivators who could fly in the sky and dig into the ground to fight. If it was a cramped area, not only would it be difficult to travel freely, some techniques would also not be able to be used. At this moment, the battle had not yet begun, and there was nothing to see here. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard a sweet sound. He looked towards the sound and saw a few young men and women sitting on the ground, with wine cups and plates in front of them. A woman with her hair combed into a flying fairy bun was fiddling with the Chinese harp, and the sound was like pearls and jade rolling plates, dripping water into a stream. He didn't understand music, so he listened quietly for a while, and then turned to go back. There were few people here, and he didn't greet them, but they noticed him. That fellow Taoist has an extraordinary bearing, and his realm is similar to ours. I wonder if he's here to fight with us? Someone guessed. Could he be a disciple of some big sect? I'm afraid you're wrong. This person came and went from the earth position, so he should be a rogue cultivator. That person wasn't convinced and said, so what? There's no lack of outstanding cultivators among the rogue cultivators, especially since our cultivation is still shallow. If we don't rely on the talismans given by our sects, we might not be able to beat the outstanding cultivators with just our cultivation. Someone said carelessly, who cares? It's hard to cultivate normally, and it's rare to have such a grand event. We should seize the moment and enjoy ourselves. Everyone clapped their hands in agreement, and after a while, the wonderful sound rang out again. Chang Zai walked one round around the surroundings, and only returned in the evening. He happened to bump into Feng Ziru and the others. Because they had gotten the talismans together, their residences were next to each other. Feng Ziru was a little confused when he saw his leisurely manner, and said, could it be that Brother Chang has arrived long ago? Didn't you encounter any obstacles along the way? It turned out that it wasn't smooth for them to come up, and they also encountered obstacles. Not only were there vines everywhere, there was also a slight magnetic force, making it difficult for them to fly, so they had to find their own way up. Because there was also a maze on the way, although it wasn't too dangerous, it still took a lot of effort to get here. It could be said that they were in a sorry state. When everyone found out that Chang Zai actually didn't encounter any problems, they were also shocked and envious, and could only attribute it to his good luck. Chang Zai understood in his heart that the celestial crane must have brought him up directly, and that was how he got around those barriers. It was already the time of the banquet, and Feng Ziru invited him to drink with them. Chang Zai didn't refuse, and came to the place of the banquet. Just now, he sat down, and there was a light sound of drums. Pauline basins floated over with the clouds, landing in the stream of flowing petals, and then lingering in front of everyone's table. It was just that before these Pauline basins were opened, no one knew what delicacies were inside. At this moment, someone reached out and took a bowl. Just now, when it was opened, bursts of fragrance came out. Looking inside, it was a bowl of thick and fragrant porridge. The grains were full and translucent, giving off a jade-like luster, and there were traces of steam coming out of it. One could feel the softness and sweetness of the porridge even before eating it. Feng Ziru's eyes lit up, and he said, Taoist Brother Fei is so lucky. This is In Valley rice. It has the effect of replenishing qi and increasing cultivation. I heard that this valley was personally planted by a few Yuanying elders of Taihao School, and it seems that there are only about 100 vats of it every year. Other than the disciples of the school eating it, there is even less that is spread to the outside world. When everyone heard this, they were instantly envious, and they also took out a lotus plate and opened it up to see if there was also a surprise. Speaking of which, some cultivators at the Mystic Light realm could already abstain from eating, but these weren't just delicious, there were great benefits to eating them, so naturally everyone scrambled for them. After more than 2 hours, everyone ended the banquet and dispersed. After Chang Zai left the banquet, he didn't return to the dormitory, but went to the stone platform outside to meditate for a night. There was still half a month before the official competition, and he spent more than 10 days like this. On this day, when he came back from cultivating, he saw Wei Zihong sitting on the praying mat, and said in surprise, Sect Master Wei? He hurriedly went up to greet him. Wei Zihong said with a smile, How have you been staying these few days? Chang Zai shook his head and said, There are many people here who enjoy themselves to the fullest, not like a place for us to cultivate. Wei Zihong looked at him for a while, and said with a smile, Junior brother can think this way, but you have passed this test. Chang Zai was startled and then reacted, Could it be? This is also a test? Wei Zihong said with a faint smile, For us to cultivate, if we don't advance, we will fall back. If our Tao heart is worn down by these sensual pleasures, and we indulge in pleasure, we will only become more and more used to it, and then neglect our cultivation. When Changzai thought about it, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Although he was wary of this, he wasn't as diligent in his studies as before these last 2 days, and was a little perfunctory. This was also because everyone around him was so leisurely and lazy, so he followed suit and relaxed. Wei Zihong sighed. Junior brother, there are many storms on the sea, and everything you see these days is all under the protection of the cultivators of the 3 sections. What do you rely on? What you rely on is your own supernatural powers. If you don't have these, everything in front of you is just a sand tower and will collapse with a push. He looked at Changzai and said, I think you already understand. Come down for a few days and watch the competition carefully. With that, he stood up and walked out. Changzai also stood up and casually put his hands together and bowed deeply towards Wei Zihong's departing figure. Thank you, senior brother. Chapter 2022. A few days later, the grand tournament began in Tonghai Mountain and lasted for more than a month. But this was only the beginning. This duel would last for at least a year, and it would only be longer, not shorter. Although it was said to be a competition between the 3 sects, in reality, the participants were far from just the 3 sections. The first to enter the arena were loose cultivators or cultivators from small sects who had come from afar. They had come here for 2 reasons. Firstly, they wanted to hone themselves, and secondly, they wanted to obtain the benefits promised to them by the 3 sections. These days, Changzai didn't miss any of the battles of the same generation. He felt that he had gained a lot, especially the endless methods of the various cultivators, which opened his eyes. In the past, his cultivation was limited to a certain area and he didn't come into contact with many cultivators. He didn't know that there were so many cultivation methods and Taoist techniques in the world. He felt that he had underestimated these rogue cultivators. After all, in order to obtain cultivation materials, they often had to fight with other races and even their own cultivators. Not to mention Taoist techniques and cultivation, just in terms of battle experience, they were very rich. Because of this, every time he came back from watching, he would discuss with Feng Ziru and the others, imagining how they would respond if they were in the arena and faced such an opponent. Although Feng Ziru and the others were also rogue cultivators, if they didn't use magic treasures, they weren't much weaker than him in terms of fighting ability. They might even be stronger than him in a short period of time. But if the battle dragged on for a long time, at least none of the people he knew could outlast him. He said this because he was, after all, cultivating the best Taoist techniques. Although he wasn't a true disciple of Qinsong school and hadn't made any great contributions to the school, the techniques he practiced were not comparable to those of rogue cultivators. It was just that after joining the Yaoyin clan, he focused more on cultivation, so his fighting ability was naturally weaker. He guessed that Wei Zihong wanted him to come here to let him know the shortcomings of this place. In a month or so, the disciples of the 3 sects will enter the arena. If we want to compete with them, then we need to show our faces at this time. Is fellow Taoist Chang interested? These past few days, Feng Ziru was also rubbing his palms together, preparing to enter the arena. If he could defeat the disciples of the 3 sects, then the rewards that should have been given to the disciples of the 3 sects would belong to him. Changzai thought about it and said, that's fine too. After watching for so many days, I'd like to try my hand. Feng Ziru laughed heartily and patted him. He turned around and said, is there anyone else who wants to give it a try? Of those who came here, not many were willing to return empty-handed. All of them voiced their agreement. Feng Ziru then wrote down everyone's names, cultivation bases, and approximate origins into a book and handed it over. In less than half a day, the deacons of the 3 sects had sent over the dueling talismans. However, according to the order set by the talismans, they would have to wait for more than 10 days before they could fight. Changzai wasn't in a hurry. If he went down later, the opponent he would meet would be of a higher standard. The next day, everyone came to the viewing platform early as usual. He had thought that it would be another evenly matched battle, but unexpectedly, the battle this time was unprecedentedly short. Between the 2 sides, before one side could make a move, a beam of sword light suddenly rose from the other side. In just a flash, the other side was defeated. Chang Zai was secretly surprised. Just now, he couldn't see clearly at all. Looking at it now, he saw that the one in the middle of the arena was a youth dressed in a brocade blue robe, with a beam of light flying around him. Could it be a flying sword? When he was at the Yaoyin clan, the ancient books in the clan had mentioned the flying sword art several times, and he had a deep impression of it. However, those who could master this art needed unique talent, and few people could do it. He didn't expect to see it today. While he was guessing, the youth didn't leave after winning, but chose to continue fighting with others. However, the second opponent didn't last long either, and was defeated in one move. After that, the third and fourth opponents went up, but they were all defeated by him as well. As for those who went later, the best they could do was hold on for a few breaths, but this wasn't a good thing, because once the youth's sword started, it was obvious that he couldn't stop. In the end, that person had a small part of his body cut off. Although he could survive with elixirs, if he couldn't be cured, then he couldn't climb any higher. Fang Ziru's expression was a little stiff, and he said, How should I win? In the past, he had only heard of the power of the flying sword, but had never seen it for himself. Now he realized that there was almost no way he could deal with it with the means he had mastered. Most importantly, if he went down, he would undoubtedly have to face this person. The others were the same, looking at his flying sword flying around, their faces all turning pale. One shouldn't expect an upper realm cultivator to watch over a fight between itinerant cultivators, and the person in charge of judging might not be much more brilliant than them. Sometimes, when they saw danger, they wouldn't make a move at all. It was just that there was a restrictive formation here, and if someone was heavily injured, they would be transported out, so their life wouldn't be at stake. Chang Zai was also thinking of a countermeasure. The flying sword flew back and forth like lightning, and one couldn't block it without a good Dharma treasure. Even if one had means, one wouldn't be able to catch up if it flew. Instead, one would be caught by it if one revealed an opening. He felt that there didn't seem to be any good ideas other than defending. His thoughts changed. He still had the ability to control spiritual birds and beasts. If he was prepared properly, he might have a chance. Moreover, strictly speaking, this was his power, so there was nothing he couldn't use. At this moment, someone said, Could this person be a Shaoqing disciple? However, the moment this was said, a tall and skinny cultivator sneered, Don't think that he's a Shaoqing disciple just because he has a flying sword. This person only has some talent in controlling swords, and he's been taught some sword techniques that are circulating outside. If a Shaoqing disciple was here, you wouldn't even be able to see him make a move. The person who spoke was also speechless. The Shaoqing sect was a large Xianmen sect. If its disciples were here, no one in the same generation of the three sects would be a match for them. At this moment, Chang Zai suddenly turned and walked out. Fang Ziru asked, Fellow Taoist, where are you going? Without turning back, Chang Zai waved his hand and said, The flying sword isn't easy to deal with. I'll go prepare some means. He came to the outskirts of Mt Tonghai and spent a few days to find a few spiritual birds and put away the beast-subduing collars that he used in his previous life. Only then did he have some confidence in his heart, so he turned back. At this moment, a golden light flashed, and Ao Tong was now on his shoulder. He said in disdain, Why do you have to use these useless things? If I show up, that kid's flying sword won't be able to hurt you. Chang Zai smiled and said, Brother Ao's powers are too high. If I ask you to come out, it'll be an unfair victory. He was a little curious. From Brother Ao's tone, you seem to have seen people who are good at using flying swords in the past? Ao Tong laughed. Of course, if we're talking about flying swords, Old Master's method in the past is called. He seemed to have thought of something halfway and coughed. You won't understand even if I tell you. I'm going to take a nap. Don't disturb me. With that said, he disappeared just as he came. Chang Zai saw that he was halfway through his sentence and pursed his lips. He went straight back to his residence, waiting to fight with the flying sword youth. However, he had thought that the youth would be invincible before the official battle. He did not expect that the youth would be defeated by a delicate-looking woman before they even fought. What everyone didn't expect was that the delicate woman just took out a magic talisman, and with a flash of white light, the flying sword disappeared. Without the flying sword, the youth's strength was reduced by more than half, and he was defeated in just a few rounds. Feng Ziru and the others were all dumbfounded. They did not expect that the seemingly strong opponent would be defeated so easily. Chang Zai's eyesight was better, and he could tell that the youth's defeat was actually because he had not refined the sword pill to the point where it was compatible with his heart, so it was easily sealed. This was also because he did not have a proper cultivation method. If it was a Shaoqing disciple, he would not have such a flaw. He looked at the woman and thought, looking at that style, it's the style of the Guanyin sect. This person is not simple. He sighed in his heart. There are so many outstanding people in the same generation. 10 odd days later, it was their turn to fight. Feng Ziru was the first to fight. Fortunately, the opponent he met was only average. After fighting for half a day, he figured out the opponent's style and found a flaw, easily winning. Next, a few others who were in the same group went up. There were also wins and losses. Not long after, it was Chang Zai's turn. He leaped and arrived at the battlefield. Looking forward, he found that his opponent was a young man with outstanding spirit. That person cupped his hands at him and said, "I'm Jiang Yun from Linqing Monastery. How should I address you, Taoist brother? Judging from your spirit, you should be a disciple of a sect, right?" Chang Zai hesitated for a moment. He did not know which sect he belonged to, but Jiang Yun thought that it was not convenient for him to say it. This was very normal. Some people simply did not want to reveal their identity, while some had enemies and were afraid of encountering trouble. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, Taoist brother. Outsiders will not know what we are talking about." Chang Zai had watched the battles for so many days, so he obviously knew about this. He thought for a moment and said, "I'm Chang Zai, I'm from the Yaoyin clan." A disciple of the Yaoyin clan? Jiang Yun's expression froze. The Yaoyin clan was a large orthodox sect, a lower sect of Qinsong school. Not to mention that the founder was an ascended Zhenren, there was also a Shangzhen in the clan now. Although he, as a junior disciple, did not know that Wei Zihong was a disciple of the Taishan sect, just the name of mortal metamorphosis was enough to make him feel reverence. Of course, this was also because Chang Zai was not of a different race. If it was a demon cultivator of the Yaoyin sect here, he would at most give a few indifferent greetings. He cupped his hands and said, "Taoist brother, please." Chang Zai also returned the greeting and said, "Please." Jiang Yun thought that Chang Zai's strength was above his, so he did not stand on ceremony and made the first move. Chang Zai also summoned his profound light to meet him, and the two of them immediately stood together. Linqing Monastery also came from the 9 continents. It could not be compared to the large sects, but among the small sects, it was also quite famous. It was just that due to the limitations of the foundation, the skills that Jiang Yun practiced were far inferior to Chang Zai's. The two of them fought back and forth at first, but gradually it became difficult to continue. After a few hours, he said that he had lost. But this person was very open-minded. Not only was he not dejected, he even invited him to drink with him later. Chang Zai also agreed readily. In the next month, Chang Zai almost had to compete with people almost every day, and felt that he had improved a lot. Because he defeated his opponent every time, he looked like he had gained a sharp aura. But after a few days, when he went to the arena again, he was surprised to find that the opponent he met this time was the weak girl who defeated the youth riding the sword. Chapter 2023. On a viewing platform in MT Tonghai, 2 people from Daoren stood there to watch the battle. One of them had the surname Wang and the other had the surname Lan, and they were both disciples of Chongyue True Temple. Elder Wang looked at the frail woman below and said, "That fellow Taoist is from Guanyin sect, right?" Elder Lan Daoren said, "There is no indication in the book that was handed over, but looking at the way the sword pill was sealed, it is indeed from Guangyuan sect." Elder Wang shook his head and said, "Young and impetuous, it is always these disciples who get into trouble the most every year. If anything happens to them, we will have to pay them a visit and give them an explanation." Elder Lan smiled and said, "There is the protection of the formation here, so there is nothing to be afraid of. Besides, with Guangyuan sex methods, there are probably not many wandering cultivators who can defeat her. Elder Wang stroked his beard and sighed, I hope so, otherwise we will have to take care of the aftermath. At this moment, the frail woman looked at Chang Zai and bowed to him, saying, Fellow Taoist, good day, may I know how I should address you? Chang Zai cupped his hands and bowed back, saying, I am Chang Zai from Yaoyin, may I ask if fellow Taoist is from Guangyuan sect? The frail woman was slightly surprised and sized him up, then she smiled and said, So it is senior brother from Yaoyin clan, little sister Ing Shu, I will have to experience senior brother's brilliance later. Chang Zai had a feeling that the other party's attitude became better after hearing that he came from Yaoyin clan, and she did not seem as frail as she looked. He said, Junior sister, I saw your battle that day, your methods are impressive, that fellow Taoist sword is so powerful, but he was taken down by you in one round. Ing Shu smiled lightly and said, I am indebted to senior brother's praise, little sister will not hold back because of this. She took a few steps back and picked up a talisman with her fingers, saying, Senior brother Chang, please. Chang Zai's expression also became serious. He originally saw that young man as a great enemy, but after seeing Ing Shu win in the end, he naturally would not be unprepared. Especially since the Guangyuan sect's techniques were not secret arts, there were many records in the Yaoyin clan, and he had even read through them in detail. The reason for this was because Wei Zihong had personally written an annotation on it. He believed that something that could attract the attention of a mortal metamorphosis cultivator must be quite extraordinary, but he didn't think that it would come in handy today. The most important cultivation technique of the Guangyuan sect was its talisman bag book, which was split into 5 paths: control, fighting, life, truth, and refinement. Each of them had their own uses, but a mystic light realm cultivator like Ing Shu wouldn't be able to grasp all 5 of them. Previously, he had used a technique similar to the forbidden flying sword. That should be the forbidden technique of the sword-holding sect. The sword-holding sect was usually used to guard and seal, so he should also have cultivated a method for frontal combat. If there was no accident, that should be the fighting sect. As for the most powerful method in the Do Gate, he couldn't help but look at the talisman between Ing Shu's fingers. In the next moment he felt his vision blur, and the talisman light had already flown over. His reaction wasn't slow either. A spiritual light flashed in his sleeve, and a feather flew out, blocking it. The light was blocked and immediately turned around, trying to go around it. However, the feather took advantage of this and instantly turned into hundreds of pieces, surrounding Chang Zai's body. The light tried to go around it a few times, but it was blocked every time. It couldn't break through this barrier. Chang Zai let out a sigh of relief. When he fought with his peers before, he didn't use any magic tools. He only used his magic power to compete with them, so that he could train himself. Now that he was facing a disciple of this level, he didn't dare to be careless at all. He immediately took out his treasure. This item was personally gathered by him, and he asked an elder of the Yaoyin clan to refine it. If it wasn't for Wei Zihong's special care, he wouldn't have the face to ask someone to help him. The effect was also surprisingly good. Now, he only needed to use a bit of inner qi and he was able to protect himself. At this moment, he heard the clanging sounds outside, and the sounds were very concentrated. He also felt his scalp tingle. This was undoubtedly the secret sword talisman of the Guangyuan sect. This item could really be compared to a flying sword to a certain extent. However, what puzzled him was that according to the records, this item could at most be used once or twice. Now, it was fighting without retreating, and its power was much smaller than in the legends. It seemed like it had been modified in some way. He felt that it was extremely inappropriate to go on like this. Because he was being suppressed here, he could only watch his opponent do whatever he wanted. On the other hand, his opponent could easily make a decision. Should he use the spiritual bird to counterattack now? He thought about it and felt that it was inappropriate. This could already be considered his killing move. If he used it right from the start, if his opponent had any other powerful tricks, he would definitely not be able to deal with it. Something like a sword talisman, no matter how it changed, was still a consumable item. Otherwise, how would it be different from a flying sword? Therefore, if he persisted, he would definitely be able to exhaust the power attached to the talisman. After thinking about it, he simply stabilized and did not move. Ing Shu repeatedly pressured with the sword talisman. Seeing that Chang Zai's defense was unusually stable, she sighed in admiration and said, "Senior apprentice brother is very patient. However, senior apprentice brother is waiting for the power of my sword talisman to be exhausted. I'm afraid senior apprentice brother is going to be disappointed." At this point, she wiped the sachet she was wearing and took out another sword talisman. She winked at Chang Zai. Chang Zai's eyelids twitched involuntarily. He did not expect Ing Shu to have a second sword talisman. In fact, he could barely deal with 2 sword talismans, but in this situation, what if his opponent had a third or fourth? Thinking of this, he was a little flustered and wondered if he should release the spiritual bird. However, on second thought, Shendong had once told him that if you were not completely confident and did not know enough about your opponent, then the biggest taboo was to let your imagination run wild. Because you could not guarantee that what you were doing was right. If you attacked casually, then you could only rely on luck. Therefore, the best way was to protect yourself as much as possible, and then observe and look for opportunities. Of course, the premise here was that he had to have a way to protect himself. Otherwise, he might as well fight with his life at the start. Therefore, he decided to fight with his opponent here and now. As long as this artifact could be defended, he would not move. He did not believe that his artifact was so weak that it could not compare to those sword talismans. Even if the artifact was broken, at worst, he would escape on the spiritual bird and compete with his opponent in terms of consumption to see who could last until the end. Seeing that Chang Zai was still unmoved, Ing Shu could not help but show a helpless expression. She actually put away the sword talisman again and said, "Senior apprentice brother, how about we call this a draw?" Chang Zai was startled and said, "Why is that?" Ing Shu sighed and said, "I did not bring many of these sword talismans. If I use them all against senior apprentice brother, I will not be able to use them in the later fights." It was rare for Chang Zai to meet such an opponent. Originally, he did not want to end things so hastily, but since his opponent had even told him about her own methods, if he continued to be entangled, it would instead make him seem petty. Moreover, he admitted that he did not have absolute confidence that he could beat Ing Shu. Before they met the disciples of the 3 sects, the 2 of them avoiding each other was not a bad idea. After thinking for a while, he said, "All right, I will fight with junior apprentice sister Ing again when I have the chance." Ing Shu smiled happily and said, "Thank you, senior apprentice brother." She curtsied and turned to fly towards the observation platform. Chang Zai also returned to his original position. Fang Ziru came up and patted his shoulder heavily, saying with a smile, "Taoist brother Chang, that girl is obviously a disciple of the sect. I did not expect you to be able to fight her to a draw. Good, very good." Seeing that he looked as if he had picked up a great bargain, Chang Zai could only say vaguely, "Lucky, lucky." However, he did not know that at this moment, Elder Wang and Elder Lan on the observation platform let out a long breath. With their insight, it was not difficult for them to see that Chang Zai was also a disciple of the sect from his cultivation method and artifact. A disciple walked over and said, "Elders, that Chang Zai's booklet is here." Elder Lan took it and flipped through it, then threw it to the side. As expected, there were no detailed records on it. Elder Wang Daoren said, "The cultivation method that young man used is somewhat similar to the Clear Feather sects, but also somewhat similar to the Yaoyin clans." Elder Blue sighed. These 2 sects were both overseen by Upper True Mortal Molt. The disciples of their sects did not stay in their sects, but instead came to compete. This was causing trouble for them. It seemed like they had to take care of them and not let any accidents happen. At this moment, the 2 of them felt something and turned to look. They saw a young girl walking over. She was dressed in a jade-colored feather robe, her facial features refined and elegant, as if she was carved out of beautiful jade. However, her expression was timid, as if she was afraid of whoever she saw. Elder Wang was surprised and asked, "Xian Yi, why are you here?" Xian Yi bowed timidly and lowered her head. Using a voice as soft as a mosquito's buzz, she said, Elder is here to let me come and watch the fight between fellow Taoists. Wang Daoren said, Good, good. There are many outstanding talents this time. Xian Yi, you have to watch carefully. Xian Yi hummed softly and curtsied, then went to the viewing platform in front. Elder Wang shook his head and said, Everything about the reincarnated body of a perfected person is good. His aptitude is also excellent, but he is a little too timid. Elder Lan was indifferent and said, As long as the perfected person can recover his previous life's cultivation, it doesn't matter if he is a little timid. As for the more powerful enemies, there will be a few Yuan Zun and Grand Elders to deal with them. After the fight, Chang Zai returned to his residence. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Wei Zihong standing there. He was delighted and went up to greet him, saying, Sect Leader Wei. Although he addressed him as such, Wei Zihong had helped him many times and he was very grateful. Even though he had not regained his memories, he had already treated him as his senior brother. Wei Zihong smiled and said, I have watched your fights these few days. They are not bad. Chang Zai was a little embarrassed and said, But just now, I have not been able to defeat my opponent. Wei Zihong smiled and said, That Ying Shu's cultivation is a level higher than yours. If you were to really compete, even if you have a few spiritual birds hidden in your hands, it would be difficult for you to win. But it would not be easy for her to win you. It is a good result to be able to call it a draw. Chang Zai's heart skipped a beat and he was secretly glad that he did not take things too seriously just now. He could not help but ask, Sect Leader Wei, if I were to meet this junior sister Ying again, how should I deal with her? Wei Zihong smiled and walked a few steps before sitting down on the couch. He said, The reason why your hands and feet are tied this time is because you have not learned the offensive Dao techniques of the cultivation method. In the past, you only used mystic light to fight. It is easy to suppress some rogue cultivators, but when you meet a real opponent, it will inevitably be difficult to deal with. Chang Zai thought about it and realized that this was indeed the case. Once mystic light was used, it would be enough to deal with many Dao techniques. But when faced with cultivators from the same sect, there would be no advantage. Wei Zihong took out a jade scroll from his sleeve and placed it on the table. He said, There are 3 Dao techniques recorded in this scroll. They are of the same origin as the cultivation method you are practicing. I did not give them to you earlier because I was afraid you would be distracted. Now you can take it and practice it. With your foundation, I believe that within half a month, you will be able to make some progress. Chapter 2024. The techniques imparted by itinerant cultivators were mostly techniques, and techniques were techniques. The two were separate, so once one wanted to practice Dao techniques, it would take a very long time. However, the superior techniques of Shen men were different. They had their own corresponding Dao techniques. As long as one's skills were complete, the foundation was there, and it was very easy to practice Dao techniques. Chang Zai was like this now. If it was an itinerant cultivator, it would take more than 10 or 20 years to learn the 3 Dao techniques. Even if it was very compatible with one's body, a few years was unavoidable. However, his cultivation was very fast, and he could feel his own improvement almost every day. Just as Wei Zihong had predicted, in a short half a month, he had already made some progress. Although he hadn't officially fought with anyone, he knew that his fighting strength had more than doubled compared to before. Most importantly, he had the means to attack. It seemed that the situation of being forced to fight would not happen again. If he met Ying Shu again, he could turn the tables and attack her. If the other party did not have a decent talisman, he could directly determine the winner. However, this also brought a problem. Originally, when he fought, he only needed to use the mysterious light. After a battle, there was almost no loss. However, if he used Dao techniques now, he was afraid that the consumption would not be small. At this moment, he raised his hand, and a rock that was about 10 feet tall collapsed silently, turning into countless small gravel that rolled on the ground. He let out a long sigh of relief. He could use this method more than 20 times in a row, so he had to choose the timing and strategy carefully during the battle. It was not the time to squander at will. There was a flash of golden light in the room, and Ao Tong came out. he lay on his shoulder and said, "Hey, you learned Tao techniques?" Chang Zai said, "Just now, I haven't learned for long, but the consumption is not small." Ao Tong said indifferently, "That is easy. At worst, just prepare more elixirs. Some of the superior elixirs only need one, and it will be enough for you to last half a day. Even if you use all your strength, it will be enough for a while." Hearing this, Chang Zai's eyes widened. If that was the case, as long as he had enough elixirs, wouldn't he be in an invincible position? He hesitated and said, "This seems to be bullying?" Ao Tong yawned and said disapprovingly, "So what? You're cultivating a superior profound cultivation technique. How can those rogue cultivators compare to you? Isn't that bullying? You were born with a higher aptitude than others, yet you went to compete with them. Isn't that bullying? You have an artifact refined by elder yuaning. Isn't that bullying?" Chang Zai thought about it and felt that it was indeed so, but he also felt that something was wrong. Ao Tong chuckled and said, "You don't have to think too much about it. Wouldn't the cultivation method of a major sect's disciple surpass yours? The pills and magic tools in their hands were even more powerful than yours. If you were to face them one day, would they still talk about rules with you? There was no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. If you could use it, then it was your own ability. This was just a duel, so you could make your own choices. But if it was a battle of life and death, would you still care about methods? Naturally, he would stop at nothing." At this moment, a voice sounded. "That's not bad, but just relying on pills and artifacts won't make you great." Chang Zai turned around and saw a long-bearded Taoist walking in. "Taoist Shen?" He stood up in surprise and bowed. "Why is Taoist Shen here?" Shen Dong took a few glances at him and said, "Not bad, fellow Taoist, you have some aura now. Our spirit-returning sect also has a disciple who came here to compete recently, and we happened to be visiting a fellow Taoist on the way, so we came here." Chang Zai's eyes lit up and said, "May I know how to address the senior brother under Taoist Shin's tutelage?" Shen Dong said, "He already has core transformation cultivation. When your cultivation improves another level, you can compete with him." Chang Zai felt a bit regretful. This time, the competition between the three sects didn't just involve clear qi and mystic-like cultivators, there were also core transformation cultivators. However, that was on the upper levels of MT Tong Hai, and it wasn't something they could see, so they might not be able to see it this time. Ao Tong saw the two talking and felt a bit bored. After a few words, he felt sleepy again and went back to sleep. At this moment, Chang Zai moved to the side and said, "Taoist Shen, please sit." Shen Dong said in a low voice, "I'm just passing by, and I have something to do later. I have to remind Taoist friend that although external objects and internal techniques are both your own strength, external objects are only means, and your own cultivation is the foundation. You need to know which is more important and which is less important." After saying this, he turned and left. Chang Zai, on the other hand, began to ponder. The three sects overseas were located in a remote area, and a battle of magical powers between low-level cultivators had attracted so many mighty people here one after another. He had a feeling that things were not as simple as they seemed, but these were not things he could be concerned about at the moment. Thus, he ordered his attendants to bring him a few pieces of hard rock and continued to practice Tao techniques. He felt that what Ao Tong said was somewhat reasonable, but he was fighting to improve himself. If he only relied on external objects to win, there wouldn't be much meaning. After all, it wasn't a real battle of life and death. Thus, he decided that as long as the opponent didn't use methods that surpassed their own, he would only use his own methods to deal with them. In the next few days, Chang Zai went up one after another, and every time he fought, he won easily. In the end, when those opponents saw him, they all just admitted defeat. Ing Shu and a young Taoist of unknown origin also met the same treatment. Another 10 days later, the disciples of the three sects finally went up to fight. Chang Zai also saw the reincarnated body that was suspected to be the Taoist grotto heaven. The other party was a woman who looked weak and afraid of people. Every time she attacked, she stopped when she was strong and never went all out. However, he didn't dare to underestimate this person. Until now, no one could force her to use her true methods. She had never seen Chong Yuzhen Temple use the Li Yuan Yin Yang flying knife that was rumored to be able to fight against flying swords. Just as he was thinking about how to deal with this person, Ing Shu came looking for him. Chang Zai invited her to sit down and ordered an attendant to serve tea. He smiled and said, "Junior sister Ing, you didn't come here just to ask for a cup of tea, did you?" Ing Shu didn't beat around the bush and said, "I've encountered a problem. I might have a battle with that senior sister Xian Yi in a few days, but I'm not completely confident. I've come here to ask for a favor." Chang Zai was startled and said, "Junior sister Ing, you've overestimated me. Even I might not be able to defeat that senior sister Xian Yi, so how can I help you?" Ing Shu laughed and said, "Senior brother, you've overestimated yourself. According to my observation, you seem to be good at controlling spirit birds and land beasts." Chang Zai was really surprised. He looked at her and didn't deny it. He asked, "How did you see that, junior sister?" He had never used any spirit birds or land beasts since he had participated in the competition, nor had he used the beast subduing collar. How did Ing Shu know? Ing Shu smiled proudly and said with some playfulness, "Do you still remember the red-crowned crane that carried you up the mountain?" Chang Zai's heart skipped a beat. He almost knew where the problem was. Ing Shu said, "I found it strange. We were all carried up by the red-crowned crane. Why did everyone else encounter obstacles, but you passed it smoothly? I went to ask that fellow Taoist crane, and with just a few elixirs, I got the gist. I then asked the seniors in the sect, and they said that you have the clear feather sex cultivation method, so I guessed that you might have the ability to appease spirit birds." Chang Zai praised, "Junior sister is really meticulous." He couldn't help but admire Ing Shu a little. At most, he only took precautions against his opponent's methods. He wasn't as serious as Ing Shu, who even noticed this detail. However, this was also because he didn't really care about winning or losing. He just wanted to compete with different Taoist friends. Ing Shu was different. She looked weak on the surface, but she had a strong personality in her bones. Either she didn't do it, or she did it to the best of her ability. What was especially rare was that she knew when to advance and when to retreat. For example, when the two of them fought last time, she knew that she had no chance of winning, so she decisively took a roundabout approach. The result proved that it was beneficial for both of them. Ing Shu looked at him and said, "So does senior brother agree?" Chang Zai waved his hand and said, "Forget about the favor. Junior sister, you let me know a loophole. This is enough. What kind of spirit bird do you want, junior sister?" Ing Shu said in surprise, "Oh? Senior brother, you can find it?" Chang Zai said confidently, "As long as it's not too much more skilled than me, and it's a bird or land beast that already exists here, or the sea creatures, I can find it and subdue it." Ing Shu suddenly realized that this senior brother's abilities seemed to be more powerful than she had imagined. She tilted her head and said, "Senior brother, aren't you afraid that I will know your methods?" Chang Zai merely smiled. A few days ago, he might have taken this matter very seriously, but after his conversation with Ao Tong and Shindong, his gaze had looked even further, or perhaps it could be said that he didn't care about the outcome of the battle before him. One or two battles that did not involve life and death could not decide anything. Cultivation was the foundation. As his mana and skill improved, he would master more and more methods. So what if others knew about his abilities? Moreover, things like spirit birds depended on the person who used them. It was completely different in his hands than in the hands of others. Seeing that he did not answer, Ing Shu did not pursue the matter. She said seriously, "I want an iron feather great goose sparrow." Chang Zai felt that it was strange. Other than having thick feathers and a slightly stronger defense, this kind of spirit bird had almost no other strong points. If Xian Yi knew how to use the Liyuan flying dagger, it would be impossible for her to block it. He could not tell what Ing Shu's goal was, but he did not think too much about it. In any case, he would see its use in 2 days. He agreed and said, "That's easy. This spirit bird can be found in this mountain. Junior sister, come to me tomorrow. You will see it." After Shindong left, they arrived at the peak of a mountain. Wei Zihong was standing there with his hands behind his back, looking down with a burning gaze. Shendong came up and said, "Sect leader Wei, did you find anything?" Wei Zihong said, "There is someone who seems to be this person, but we can't be sure yet." Shendong said, "Then let's wait. This person has infiltrated the three sects, so he must have some ulterior motive. We will see him eventually." This time, they did not come here just for the battle. As the mountain and sea realm's spiritual opportunity improved, Taoist cultivators benefited, but so did the outsiders and demons. This was especially true in the past few decades. Not only did many demons and outsiders improve by leaps and bounds, but there were also void beings from the outer heavens who broke through the realm and came here. However, most of them were killed by the two deities, Bo Bai and Bo Xian. But a year ago, for some reason, there was a loophole in the heavenly workings. A fish slipped through the net and landed in the deep sea to the east. However, there had been no movement since then. Bo Bai and Bo Xian were only guarding the outside world, and could not interfere with the internal affairs of the mountain and sea realm. Therefore, this matter could only be handled by the sects of the 9 continents. But later, it was discovered that this person had most likely transformed into a human and was hiding in the 6 continents of the North Sea. It was even possible that he had impersonated one of the disciples of the 3 sections. In order not to alarm this person, the Xianling sect did not make a move. This time, they asked Wei Zihong and Shendong, who liked to visit friends and ask questions, to handle this matter. Chapter 2025. Wei Zihong looked for a while and said, "This person is now a disciple of Yanzhong Monastery. If we capture him directly, it won't look good for us. Let's greet the elders first." As a mortal metamorphosis, he didn't need to care about the thoughts of the cultivators below him when dealing with the demons from the outside world. However, Yanzhong Monastery had contributed greatly to the fight against Yuxiao School. Even the sect master Li Xiaomi died because of this, so he should give him some respect. Shendong also knew the reason, so he didn't object. The two figures suddenly disappeared from where they were. When they reappeared, they were already in front of Yanzhong Monastery's camp on Mount Tonghai. The 2 Yuanying elders of Yanzhong Monastery suddenly sensed something and hurriedly came out to greet them. They bowed and said, "Greetings, venerable ones. I didn't know you were here. Please forgive me for my lack of manners." They were also anxious when 2 mortal metamorphoses came together. They didn't know what this was about. Wei Zihong nodded slightly to return the greeting. He said, "Sect Master Shen and I are here to discuss something with you too." One of the elders, Gao, quickly turned sideways and made a gesture of invitation. He said, "Venerable ones, please come in and have a seat." Wei Zihong and Shendong didn't stand on ceremony and followed him into the inner courtyard. When they sat in the inner room, a servant came up to serve tea. Wei Zihong took a sip and put it down. Elder Gao knew what to do. He waved his hand and dismissed all the servants and maids. He said carefully, "Sect Master Wei is talking about." Wei Zihong said straightforwardly, "Within a year, a demon came from beyond the heavens. Due to an unforeseen event, it escaped the interception of the sun and moon gods and landed in the 6 continents of the North Sea. Fearing that it would cause trouble, the fellow Taoists of the various sects asked me and Sect Master Shun to come here to investigate." Shendong said in a deep voice, "Among the people in this battle, there is someone from your sect that is suspected to be this person." Elder Gao was shocked and couldn't sit still. He said, "Venerable ones, may I ask who it is?" A demon that could make a mortal metamorphosis cultivator come out was needless to say what level it was. Knowing that such a demon was hiding in his sect, he was also very nervous. With a thought from Wei Zihong, the figure of a young man appeared in the minds of the 2 elders. When the 2 elders saw this person, they looked at each other and revealed hesitation. The other elder with the surname he spoke with difficulty, "Esteemed sirs, this matter. I'm afraid there's been a mistake?" Wei Zihong raised his eyebrows and looked over, asking, "Why does Elder he say so?" Under his gaze, Elder he felt the pressure increase, but he braced himself and said, "I won't hide it from you too. This Luo Ying is the reincarnation of our former sect master. Elder Gao stood up, bowed to the two of them and said, "We have examined this disciple. This matter is definitely true. If a Taoist cultivator reincarnated, then his direct disciple would have an invisible karmic connection. Moreover, this reincarnated body would not enter the Tao. Usually, there would be someone to look after each reincarnation and leave behind a record. When the time was right to enter the Tao, then the reincarnation would enter the sect. It could be said that the reincarnation would always be under the eyes of the sect. Generally speaking, there would be no mistakes." Wei Zihong said, "Oh? Was he the reincarnation of Jinrenli? I've never heard of him before." Elder Gao bowed and said bitterly, "Yan Zhongguan's influence is small, and the reincarnation of the former sect master is especially important, so we have been hiding the news." Yan Zhongguan hadn't disclosed Li Xiaomi's reincarnation in advance because Yan Zhongguan was the weakest among the three sects, and most of them were demonic cultivators. There were many people who hated them. They were really afraid that they would be targeted by others and it would be difficult to protect them. Shen Tong said in a deep voice, "Whether it is or not, we'll know once we summon this person." The two elders looked at each other. They couldn't refuse Jinren Fan Tu's request. Moreover, even though they were confident, if something really went wrong, they couldn't afford to bear the consequences. Yan Zhongguan would suffer a loss. Elder He walked to the side, called a disciple in and said, "Go and summon Luo Ying. If he asks anything, you don't have to say anything." The disciple was also clever and said in a low voice, "I understand." Elder He Daoren said, "Go." He returned to his seat and said, "He will be here in a moment." After a while, the sound of footsteps came from outside, and a young man walked in. His skin was fair, and his eyes were full of spirit. He wore a brocade yellow band on his forehead, and bright jade was inlaid in the middle. He stood out from the crowd, and his bearing was graceful. His appearance was extremely good. He came up and bowed, saying, "Greetings to the two elders." Elder Gao hurriedly said, "These are the two Shangjin, come and greet them." Shangjin? Luo Ying couldn't help but show a trace of shock, but she could see that he had a good temperament, so she suppressed it and came up to bow solemnly, saying, "Greetings to the two Shangjin." Wei Zihong looked at him with interest and said, "Aren't you afraid of being exposed by coming here like this?" Luo Ying was startled and said hesitantly, "I don't understand what you mean by that." Wei Zihong smiled and said, "Although you hide it very well, a different kind is a different kind. You don't have to do such a useless thing in front of us." Luo Ying was even more confused and said, "I don't know what you mean by that. If I have done something wrong, please tell me. If I have done something wrong, I am willing to accept punishment." Wei Zihong ignored his words and said, "If you really cover up your memory and completely hide it from yourself, it is also a skill. But you don't want to give up your name, yet you still dare to come here. Should I say that you are arrogant or arrogant?" Luo Ying was even more puzzled. He looked at the two elders for help. Elder Gao Daoren said, "This, Shangjin, are you really mistaken?" Wei Zihong said, "You said this is the reincarnation of Jinrenli?" Elder Gao hesitated for a moment and said, "With my shallow eyesight, I think it is not bad." Wei Zihong smiled and said, "I have seen a person these days. I should say that he is the reincarnation of Jinrenli." "What?" The two elders were really surprised. Elder Gao hurriedly asked, "May I know who sect leader Wei is talking about?" Wei Zihong said, "He is one of the three rogue cultivators who entered the competition. His name is Jingjiang. As long as we find this person and check him, the two elders will know who is the real one and who is the fake one." Luo Ying's face was still full of grievance and anger, but now that he heard this, he couldn't help but sigh. All these expressions disappeared, and his face fell. He sighed and said, "So you really know. There is no need to check." He admitted to Wei Zihong and Shen Dong, "I am the alien you are looking for." As soon as he said this, his qi suddenly rose. In the eyes of Wei Zihong and Shen Dong, his whole body was no longer what it was in front of them. Instead, it was crystal clear, like a long snake made of starlight. It was clearly a void creature. However, before his qi could rise, it took the initiative to restrain itself. Obviously, he just revealed his identity and didn't dare to be presumptuous here. Although Elder Gao and Elder He were mentally prepared, their hearts were still shaken. Elder Gao was shocked and angry. He pointed at him and said, "You, how did you get around the restriction on it?" It wasn't difficult for a mortal metamorphosis-level demon to deceive them, but the problem was that even the things that Li Xiaomi left behind had restrictions placed by the Clear Feather Sect's sect leader. Later on, this person severed his mortal body and didn't forget to place restrictions on those things. If those things were taken by an outsider, there would definitely be a conflict and it would be discovered by Yan Zhongguan. However, the problem was that nothing unexpected happened during the process. Luoying said, "If I break the restriction on it by force, it will indeed alarm you, but I have a skill that allows me to take other people's karma for my own use." He carefully looked at Wei Zihong, and that person should be the Zheng Jiang that this Shangjin mentioned. So that person is the reincarnation of the previous sect leader. We almost made a big mistake. Elder Gao angrily looked at Luoying. He was also afraid. If this matter was really hidden, it was hard to imagine what would happen to Yan Zhongguan in the future. Wei Zihong looked at Luoying with interest and said, "Why didn't you fight back?" Luoying smiled bitterly and said, "The reason why I hid before was because I was afraid that you would find me. I know that there are many people who are stronger than me in this world, so there is no chance of winning. Since I entered this world, I haven't killed anyone. If I don't fight back, I still have some hope of survival. But if I fight back, I will definitely die." At this time, Wei Zihong flicked his sleeve and threw out a black pill. He lightly said, "Since you are tactful, then swallow it and come with me." Luoying struggled for a moment, but he still took the pill and swallowed it. In an instant, his vitality was reduced to nothing. His whole body seemed to have lost its spirit. He looked dispirited and listless. At this moment, he really didn't have the strength to resist. Wei Zihong rolled his sleeve again and put it away. He said, "Two elders, this matter is over. We will take our leave." The two elders quickly bowed and said, "Respectfully send off the two of you." When the two looked up again, they found that the two of them had disappeared. Elder Gao's expression changed at this time. He said, "Quick, Elder He, quickly go and fetch the reincarnation of the former sect master. If he loses in the battle, we will not be able to redeem ourselves even if we die 10,000 times." In the main hall of Qinghuan Palace in Xianyuan Heaven, Zhang Yan's body was glowing brilliantly, but if one looked closely, the wisps of light were no longer limited to this part of the world, but had spread to every corner of Busu Heaven. This meant that it wouldn't take long, at most a few years, for Busu Tian to fall into his hands. But he could also feel that as the final moment approached, the last bit of strange power in Busu Tian began to churn. This was the last struggle and counterattack. So now, in different worlds, more or less, there were some incidents. Strictly speaking, this was the matter of Wei Zihong and Shen Dong going to investigate. The void creature only instinctively headed towards the places with abundant spiritual vigor. Originally, it should have been killed by Bo Bai and Bo Xian. However, due to the change in Busu's unusual power, it caused a flaw in the heavenly design, and that was how it managed to slip through. It could be said that at this time, all kinds of accidents could happen. But these things didn't need him to show up. He had already informed Dan Yi and the others, and as long as they and the sects of the other worlds were careful, it wouldn't be difficult to solve. The only trouble now was that he found that the Chaos Heaven was getting closer and closer, and it seemed that it would connect to Busu Tian first. He suddenly had a feeling that if he didn't complete the task of controlling Busu Tian before the Chaos Heaven arrived, something might happen because of this place. He thought about it carefully, and out of caution, this sign obviously couldn't be ignored. So, he changed his divine will and suddenly accelerated the process of controlling Busu Tian. Chapter 2026. In the silence, Taoist Shenchang was originally comprehending the Tao in the land of forestalling, but suddenly he felt his heart palpitate. Feeling that something was wrong, he immediately tried to calculate, but he found nothing and could not make any headway. At this time, a shadow flashed outside. It was Taoist Zhan Yuan. He came up and bowed, then said with a serious expression, "Fellow Taoist, did you notice it?" Taoist Shunchang nodded, but he couldn't help but show a trace of worry. The feeling was not obvious at first, but now it was getting more and more intense. It was extremely oppressive, as if a great disaster was coming. Taoist Zhang hesitated for a moment and said, "Fellow Taoist, do you think it's because that existence is coming?" This was the last thing he wanted to see, but it was the most consistent with the current inference. Taoist Shunchang sighed and said, "It's hard to know. Fellow Taoist Xianyuan must have also sensed such an unusual movement. Now, we only need to see if the place where he is seeking refuge has been arranged properly. If we can't stay there, we will have to fight if that existence comes." Taoist Zhang Yuan nodded silently. After Zhang Yan asked them for advice on how to pass the Enlightenment Pass, he went into closed-door training. Later, they couldn't sense his whereabouts anymore. Taoist Zhang Yan guessed that the latter must have opened the world of tranquility and was probably still immersed in cultivation. Therefore, they could do nothing but wait. In the Tsangqing world of tranquility, Taoist Qing Sheng's expression was extremely serious. He also felt that something was wrong, but his cultivation was higher than that of ordinary deities, so he was sure that this matter was definitely related to that existence. Before that existence came, he already knew that he couldn't compete with it. He thought to himself, everything in the void is normal, and that existence is far from coming. But now, something like this has happened. Could it be that some unforeseen event is about to happen? As he thought of this, his heart stirred. Could it be related to the place of creation essence behind that fellow Taoist? If that was the case, it might be good news. However, he felt that it was slightly troublesome. He originally intended to gather some essence of creation and send it to Zhang Yan, so that even if he couldn't form a relationship with Zhang Yan, he could still help Zhang Yan. But now, it was obviously too late for him to do this. Now he could only try to pay attention. As long as Zhang Yan's mana and qi activity appeared, he would immediately rush over to see if he could obtain his permission to seek protection from that side. In the present world, as Zhang Yan's consciousness continued to spread, the entire Busushan faintly trembled. At this time, in the various realms, countless beasts began to throb. Not only that, but there was an inexplicable flaw in the previously sealed area, which was supposed to be a very stable place, causing the monsters and fiendish demons that were imprisoned to escape. There were also some people who disappeared inexplicably. Most of them were gods from the Kunsher continent, and most of them were gods of mountains and rivers who had been sent to the continent. Most importantly, there were also some gods who guarded the kingdoms. Once the kingdoms of the Tao lost the protection of gods, the vassal kingdoms themselves might not be able to withstand the beasts of the wastelands. Therefore, the kingdoms were in a state of chaos. Even the vassal kingdoms that still had gods guarding them were afraid that they would encounter a similar situation, so they slaughtered livestock and beasts to pray for peace. In addition, there were also void creatures and greater demons that began to madly rush into the various realms. The more abundant the spiritual opportunity, the more it suffered. Fortunately, the sects had been warned in advance and were already on guard. But because of the confusion of the heavenly workings, there were always some otherworldly creatures that slipped through the defenses, or strange changes occurred, causing unrest in the realms. For example, in the mountain and sea realm, there was a demon devil that had been attacked by a group of mortal metamorphosis cultivators when it tried to cross over into the mountain and sea realm. It had originally been dead, but its body exploded into countless chunks of flesh and blood, which scattered throughout the mountains and seas, benefiting countless demons. Only half a year later, quite a few of them crawled out from the depths of the mountains, and then began to fight with the Taoist cultivators who occupied the spirit mountains and blessed lands. The large sects were still able to deal with this, but some of the smaller sects and loose cultivators found it hard to resist. They either suffered great losses or were flattened and destroyed. There were even some transfer formations that had been built long ago that were destroyed. As a result, many territories were cut off from the outside world. Some people complained that if the mountain and sea realms' restrictive spells were still in place, none of this would have happened. The truth was that the restrictive spells had been set up to defend the mountain and sea realm when it was weak. It was impossible to say how much spiritual opportunity and spell formations were used to maintain them, as well as the constant presence of upper realm cultivators. Obviously, it couldn't be maintained for very long. Furthermore, because of the changes in the heavenly workings, even if the spell formation were still there, it would still be a problem. The chaos caused by the outpouring of Bushbeard Heaven's strange power lasted for several years before things gradually settled down. The main reason was that the cultivators were now powerful, and with the 4 world creators above Yuanzun, they were more than enough to suppress the outsiders. However, there were still some ripples that had yet to subside. Every year or so, they would erupt again, but generally speaking, the situation was under control. As for Zhang Yan, he could sense that as the strange power flowed out, the obstacles in front of him were gone, and the boundless Weili was slowly fusing with him. His consciousness had clearly sunk into the depths of Bushbeard Heaven, and should have been muddle-headed at first, but now it was getting clearer and clearer. That meant that he was becoming more and more compatible with this place. During this process, his consciousness spread out to every corner of Bushbeard Heaven. Although the place was boundless and immeasurable, because of the Weili's resonance, he was getting closer and closer to that place. After an indeterminable amount of time passed, a bright light suddenly appeared in front of him, and he knew that it was the true location of Bushbeard Heaven. Perhaps it didn't originally exist, but almighty soul refinement experts could see what was illusory and what was real. Since he could see it now, it meant that his consciousness could visualize it. Furthermore, if he could do it in Bushbeard Heaven, then it was only natural that it would exist. At this point, he didn't hesitate at all. His consciousness turned and immediately went to merge with it. The next moment he suddenly opened his eyes, and the universe was reflected in them. A moment later he slightly lowered his eyes and looked around Bushbeard Heaven. When he saw that it was chaotic everywhere, he raised his sleeves and casually waved his hand. The remaining strange power was dispersed, and everything returned to its original position. At this moment he had truly grasped this place of creation essence, and he no longer feared the threat of the outside world. He sat silently for a moment, and with a turn of his mind, his consciousness returned to his body. At this moment he suddenly felt a stagnant pressure wrap around him, as if there was something in the silence that wanted to swallow him. His eyes flashed. In the present world, he had been fighting with that existence in disguise, so he quickly determined that this phenomenon had something to do with it. However, now that he had formed his power, he could hide in Bushbeard Heaven at any time. Even if that existence appeared in front of him now, it wouldn't be able to do anything to him. However, he had promised Xin Chang and the others to help them avoid this disaster. Since there was a change in the silence, it was time to bring them here. He looked around and saw Xin Chang boy lying on the huge lotus leaf, still sleeping soundly. He smiled and flicked his finger. A ray of light hit the leaf, and the dew on the leaf swayed back and forth. He said, "Friend, you can wake up now." Shen Changboy rubbed his eyes and stood up from the lotus leaf. Zhang Yan said, "There is a change in the outer world. Friend, you can't stay here any longer. You can hide in the place of creation essence behind me." As he spoke, there was a ray of light amidst the millions of lives and deaths behind him. At the same time, there was an infinite spiritual opportunity that came out of it. Shen Changboy seemed to have realized something. He bowed to him with a serious face and walked into the place. At this moment, there were 2 flows of mana approaching. It was Xin Chang and Zhai Yuan. The 2 of them came closer and bowed to him. They wanted to say something, but Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, "Friends, there is a strange movement outside. Please enter the place of protection first. I will talk to you 2 after everything is settled." Shen Chang and Zhai Yuan looked at each other and bowed deeply to him. They then went into Bushbeard Heaven. After the 2 of them went in, Zhang Yan looked to the other side and said, "Since friend is here, why don't you show yourself?" Taoist Qing Sheng turned around, cupped his fists, and said in a magnanimous manner, "Greetings, fellow Taoist. I'm sure fellow Taoist knows my purpose for coming here today." He flipped his hand and took out an item. "I have a fragment of creation essence here. I am willing to give it to you." He could only rely on the fragment of creation essence in his hand. It was not easy to find, and he was not sure if it could move Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan and the Azure Saint did not have much of a relationship. However, the Azure Saint did not do anything unfavorable to him. Instead, he told him what he saw when he passed the test. Although it was a way to make up for what he did not do, at least the estrangement between him and the Azure Saint had been resolved. Putting all these aside, in order to fight against that existence, it would be better to have one more person. He extended his hand and said, "Friend, please." Qing Shing was relieved. He bowed and said, "Thank you, friend. I will repay you in the future." After bowing, he went into Bushbeard Heaven. At this moment, Zhang Yan felt a surge of mana. He raised his head and saw Quan Dao and Zhu Yu's silhouettes. One of them solemnly bowed and said, "That person's magic power is far greater than ours, and he doesn't want to see us." Fellow Taoist once said that when the time comes, he will give us an accurate answer. I hope fellow Taoist can give us some face in the past and allow me to hide for a while. Zhang Yan's thoughts changed. These two people were clearly not on the same path as him. In the past, they were only seeking more benefits. It was just that they were the same. If they wanted to fight against that existence, they would need more people. Moreover, he was confident that he could control this person, so he wasn't afraid that they would cause any trouble. Thus, he smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, there's no need to panic." Quan Dao and Zhai Yuan were overjoyed. Just now, they were smiling. The next moment, they disappeared in front of Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed. This situation was extremely sudden. The magical energy of the tempered divinity cultivators clashed with each other. It was impossible for them to leave without leaving any traces. But at this moment, he suddenly sensed something. He lifted his head and looked into the depths of the void. It was as if he could sense a pair of eyes staring at him, but a moment later, they disappeared. His eyes became deeper. He stood there for a moment and waved his sleeves. He turned around and entered Bushbeard Heaven. Chapter 2027. Zhang Yan stepped into Bu Su Tian. Previously, he had only used his consciousness incarnation to occupy this space, but now that he had entered with his real body, he immediately felt that it was different from before. He felt that with just a thought, he could mobilize the Wei around him at will, as if everything was in the palm of his hand. In this place, there was no one of his generation that could compete with him. As for outsiders, unless they had the ability to destroy this place filled with the essence of creation in one go, they would only be able to enter this place if they obtained his acknowledgement. It was for this reason that Bu Su Tian could become a place of protection. However, not everything here was perfect. Even though he had become the master of this place of creation essence, he could not peek into all the secrets here. He could only mobilize most of the power here. Due to the limitations of his cultivation, his method of controlling this place was slightly rough. In addition, the backup left by the powerful people in the past had not been completely eliminated. Therefore, in theory, there were still people who could compete with him for the right to control this place, but the possibility was very small. This was because if someone wanted to make things difficult for him, he did not need to fight them directly. He only needed to mobilize the Bu Su Tian Wei, and he could easily suppress or expel them. There was another thing worth noting. Because he had not found the majority of the Bu Su Tian's Yin energy, this place of essence was actually not complete. Because of this place was not completely without loopholes. There were many gaps, and external forces might be able to invade through these gaps. However, as long as he, as the master, paid attention and cleaned them from time to time, although there were small problems, they would not cause too much harm. At this moment, with a thought, he came in front of Xinchang, Qing Shing, and the others. After entering Bu Su Tian, these people did not move casually. Obviously, they knew very well who was the master and who was the guest here. Xinchang and Zhaiyuan saw his arrival and came forward to greet him. Xinchang boy also followed behind and bowed. Xinchang Taoist solemnly thanked him. "I really have to thank you for being able to hide here this time." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "The two of you have helped I a lot in the past, so there's no need to be so polite." At this moment, Taoist Qing Sheng took a few steps forward and cupped his fists. Then, he took out the fortune fragment and said, "This is what I promised to give to fellow Taoist. I hope fellow Taoist will accept it." He was different from Shun Chang and Zhang Yuan. He did not have any friendship with Zhang Yan, so he could only use this method to subtly express his intention to be subservient. At this moment, Zhang Yan had the entire Bu Su Tian, so he didn't care about 1 or 2 fragments. However, if he didn't accept it, the other party would feel uneasy. He smiled and his eyes fell. The fragment turned into a ray of light and entered his body. Taoist Qing Sheng's expression relaxed slightly, but he was thinking about how to maintain their relationship. Zhang Yan's gaze moved around, and when he saw that they seemed to be unaware of what had happened outside earlier, he said, "After all of you entered earlier, fellow Taoists Luan Fang and Bing Kong came looking for you as well, and they wanted to enter this place to seek protection." Taoist Shun Chang and the others didn't say anything. They didn't see the two of them at the moment, so they guessed that perhaps Zhang Yan didn't let them come in. However, why did he tell them this now? Could it be that he wanted to warn them and let them know who was the master and who was the servant here? Zhang Yan looked at the people in front of him and said slowly, "Although the two of them are not friends with I, we still have some dealings. Moreover, we are still too weak to fight against that existence, so I wanted to let the two of them in." However, before the two of them could enter this place, they disappeared for no reason. I didn't feel anything strange, so I suspected that it was the doing of that existence. He recounted what had just happened. When the others heard it, they all felt a wave of horror in their hearts. Taoist Qing Sheng was shocked, and at the same time, he felt fortunate. Before he entered this place, he was already able to sense that the oppressive feeling was already dense to the extreme, and if he was a step later, then perhaps he would have suffered the same fate as those two people. Taoist Zhang said in a heavy voice, "So, this existence really showed himself?" Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, "Based on the current situation, it seems so. As for what exactly happened, I will try to find out more." Taoist Shun Chang thought for a while and said, "After all, the two of them are not weak. Even if that existence's cultivation is extremely high, it shouldn't be so easy to kill him. It is likely that he is temporarily suppressed by the Weili." Qing Sheng shook his head and said, "Even if it is as you said, if he can't escape, it is only a matter of time before he falls into eternal silence. A cultivator of the spirit refinement realm could not be killed and could only be expelled into eternal silence. However, if one party was strong enough to suppress you from beginning to end, the result would not be much different. After all, the almighty cultivators of the spirit refinement realm were all Weili, and as long as they wanted to, they could hold on forever." At this time, Taoist Qing Sheng looked at Zhang Yan and said with a serious expression, "Taoist Xin Yuan, if that existence exists outside, it will be difficult for us to have a peaceful day. Even if he can't come in now, he will definitely find a way to break in. We also need to find a way to counterattack, otherwise, we will be too passive." His words were partly out of his own will, and partly out of practical considerations. Although he had now been protected and avoided a crisis, he was actually living under someone else's roof. As a Grand Supreme of the Spirit Refinement Realm, he wanted to be free and unrestrained, so he did not want to keep hiding like this. Taoist Zhang thought for a while and also said, "What Taoist Qing Sheng said is not unreasonable. It is good to live in a place of protection, but that existence will definitely find a way to break in, so we can't just stay here and defend." Zhang Yan thought for a while. Although such a thing was not likely to happen now, nothing was absolute in the world. It was right to prepare for a rainy day, and counterattack was also necessary. He did not want to be trapped here forever. Moreover, there was another important reason that forced them to react. That being had appeared to invade and destroy everything. Therefore, with every deity refinement cultivator that died, its power would grow by a bit. If the two of them were really trapped by that being, even if it was to prevent the being's power from growing, they had to find a way to help them escape. Even if it was up to him to end things, he could not allow them to fall into the hands of that being. However, they still knew nothing about it, and there was a big gap between their cultivation, so they could not be rash. Thinking of this, he said, "Bu Su Tian is vast and boundless. Fellow Taoists, since you have come here, please choose a place to stay. After the arrangements are made, we will talk again in detail. Taoist Shenchang cupped his hands and said, if that is the case, then I will disturb fellow Taoist. He turned around and discussed with Taoist Zhangyun for a while, then they went their separate ways. Taoist Qing Sheng's thoughts changed. In his mind, the meaning behind Shenchang's words was that they should not wander around randomly and should only stay in one place. He did not have any objection to this. When guests came to the host's place, the guest could only follow the host's wishes. If he was the ruler of this place, he would do the same. Therefore, he cupped his hands and said that he had disturbed them, then waved his sleeves and left to find a place to stay. Shenchang boy bit his finger and lowered his head to think for a moment. Then he looked up and said, this place is quite good. Zhang Yan smiled and said, in that case, fellow Taoist can stay here. Shenchang boy nodded. A lotus branch emerged behind him and turned into a big leaf. He then sat down on it and fell into a deep sleep after a while. Zhang Yan stood in the same place and waited for a while. In his senses, Shenchang, Zhangyun, Qing Sheng, and the others each stayed in a place. Then their qi activity stopped there. It was as if several floating islands had appeared in the boundless ocean. The moment he stopped, the world of reality appeared behind him. The reason for this was that they were forced to do so by that existence. Because people had the ability to invade and destroy everything, once all the realms disappeared from the void, as long as they left Busu Tian, even if they didn't fight with others, they would still fall into eternal silence. Therefore, it was necessary to leave behind an immortal realm. Before this, Zhang Yan had set up a layer of protection so that this existence could not see the Kunshur continent and could not sense the existence of the other heavens. Of course, logically speaking, the people in the lower realms were the changes in the world. For spirit refinement cultivators, they were too insignificant and not worthy of their attention. Even if they saw the cultivators of the other heavens, they would most likely not take them seriously. But because of this, just now, they needed to be separated to avoid being inadvertently harmed. At this time, seeing that there was nothing to do for the time being, he once again sent a part of his consciousness into Shenyuan heaven. Before that existence had arrived, the stimulation of qi activity had already caused a lot of chaos in Busu Tian. Now that it seemed to have appeared, and there were still many loopholes in Busu Tian, it was very likely that it would be invaded by its Weili and cause more trouble. Therefore, he needed to take some necessary precautions. He summoned the disciples who were still stationed in Qinghuan Palace and gave them some instructions. Then he sent a message to the 4 Yuanzun cultivators and the other sects of the heavens, telling them to stay vigilant and defend against foreign enemies. In addition, there were 2 other things that were very important. The first was to continue to improve his cultivation. Controlling Busu Tian was not only to control this place, but also a process of seeking the Tao. Just now, he occupied this place, and the benefits were not immediately apparent. They could only be seen as his cultivation increased. The only regret was that because he and a group of spirit refinement cultivators had hidden in this place, the Void Revolution and Busu Tian's evolution were already similar, so he did not have much of an advantage over that existence. Another thing was that if he wanted to exert strength outside, he needed to consolidate his foundation. If the interior was not stable, he could not concentrate his strength. First, he had to sort out the interior of Busu Tian. He had to find a way to find the missing yin qi and fill in the loopholes. Then, he had to find a way to integrate the elusive chaos heaven into Busu. He had no clue about the former, but he could find a way to solve the latter first. He immediately looked at the location of the chaos heaven. Before he controlled Busu Tian, it had rushed over here as if it wanted to fight with him. But now, its momentum had slowed down, but from the looks of it, it was about to arrive. After waiting patiently in the palace for 2 years, the chaos heaven finally descended. At the moment it connected with Busu Tian, he guided it with his mind, and the door opened in front of him. His deep and serene eyes looked into the room for a moment, then he shook his sleeves, slowly stood up, and stepped inside. Chapter 2028. The The sky was clear, and the waves were as calm as a mirror. The birds' cries came from far away, and then gradually faded away. On the boat, an old man wearing a straw raincoat was fishing on the river. Beside him, a strong and dignified child was squatting there, watching with wide eyes. The old man suddenly felt the rod sink and knew that a fish had taken the bait. He hurriedly exerted force, and the child also came to help. After the boat swayed for a while, a white-bellied, silver-scaled fish was caught. The old man removed the hook and put the fish into the basket. He then rubbed the child's head and said with narrowed eyes, "Good grandson, good grandson." At this time, the child pointed into the distance and asked curiously, "Grandpa, what is that?" The old man turned around and saw the shadow of a towering mountain in the distance. The hazy greenish-gray color seemed to occupy half the sky, but just now, he clearly didn't see it. He wasn't too surprised. Instead, his murky eyes revealed a look of reminiscence, and he said with a sigh, "This is the immortal mountain. Past it is the place where the immortals live. When I was young, I came here with my fellow villagers to fish, and I was fortunate enough to see it a few times." At this time, the originally calm river water suddenly surged, and the water splashed continuously as if it was boiling. The child seemed to hear something again, and he looked up at the sky and said innocently, "Grandpa, there are so many big birds." The old man was startled, and he looked up. He saw waves of air rolling through the sky, and with a rumbling sound, they went straight in the direction of the immortal mountain. His expression changed, and he hugged the child, protecting him in his arms. He had seen this kind of situation in the past. It was said that when the immortals passed by, they would cause great winds and waves, and even thunder and rain, but it was extremely rare. But this time, it happened one after another. In just a short period of time, there were several waves of sound, and it caused the water of the river to sway. When everything quieted down, the old man didn't dare to stay here any longer, and he hurriedly rowed away. At this time, the passing waves of air in the sky all went toward the opposite immortal mountain. One of them passed through the veil like fog, and suddenly there was a burst of light in front of him. He saw countless flying mountains floating and falling, and thousands of palaces standing here. Under the illumination of the sun, the glazed tiles were suffused with golden light. The Milky Way waterfall floated in the air and surrounded the four directions. The splashing jade beads and crystal water formed a bright rainbow bridge. At this time, the waves of air dissipated, and several Taoists appeared. One of them gave an order, and then he landed alone in front of a golden palace. After reporting in front of the hall, he was led to a large tower, where a tall and handsome young Taoist stood with his hands behind his back. He didn't dare to look at the ever-changing vision behind him, so he bowed his head and said respectfully, "Dao Master Miao Yu. Dao Dao Miao Yu Dao." Dao Master Miss Jade looked over and said, "There are hundreds of sects in the four chaotic domains. You are the first to arrive." The cultivator said seriously, "Since it's Dao Master's order, how can the Jing Liang branch dare to delay?" Dao Master Miao Yu's voice was a bit gentle. "We're all from the same sect, so there's no need to pay too much attention to etiquette. Go down and wait first." The cultivator bowed, and an attendant came up to lead him out. After this person left, Dao Master Miao Yu came down to meet more than a dozen sect masters from the other chaos realms. When no one came for a while, his eyes moved slightly, and a shadow walked out of his body. After just a few steps, he came to an unfathomable place. There was only a jade palace floating here. He walked slowly to the steps and asked, "Is Senior Brother here?" A woman appeared above the jade palace gate, and she bowed and said, Dao Master Luo Zhan is in the Mi Palace worshipping the Patriarch. Please wait for a moment." When Dao Master Miao Yu heard the mention of the Patriarch, his expression became solemn, and he said, "Then I'll wait here." After a long time, the jade gate opened, and the golden pillar moved. A black-haired, long-bearded, middle-aged Taoist walked out. He was full of green light, and his aura was magnificent. However, there seemed to be an invisible whirlpool behind him that swallowed up all the light and color. Dao Master Miao Yu came up and bowed, "Greetings, Senior Brother," and then asked, "Did teacher respond?" Dao Master Luo Zhan shook his head and sighed. It's still the same as before, no response. He stroked his beard and said decisively, if that's the case, then we'll still act according to teacher's order before he left, and strive to not make any mistakes. Dao Master Miao Yu's expression was slightly solemn. Will the trial of leaving the void still come? Dao Master Luozhan said, Junior brother, don't worry. According to the order, as long as our junior brother arrives, he will rule the chaotic domain and control the place of creation from afar. Then, everything will be fine. Dao Master Miao Yu nodded. According to the edict, this junior brother was the last disciple of the patriarch and was the only person who could become a spirit refinement cultivator. If they could get him, with his ability, all kinds of dangers could be resolved. Dao Master Luozhan asked, has Chen Jiliang arrived? The world behind Qinsong is especially important, and it involves the place of creation, so they can't be left out. Dao Master Miao Yu said, the chaotic domain where he lives isn't the upper class, so he will always be delayed when he comes to my place. Dao Master Luozhan grunted. Dao Master Miao Yu said, Senior brother, his cultivation is weak, and he can only be considered the bottom among the various branches. It doesn't matter whether he comes or not. Dao Master Luozhan said, even so, we can let them be in the past. However, the place where the chaotic domain colludes with is related to the order, so we can't do without them. Dao Master Miao Yu said, then I will send someone to urge them later. Dao Master Luozhan said, there's no need for that. They don't dare to go against the order, so we can just wait here. Above the tall mountain, another wave of air rolled past, and after it landed, a clear body of Daoren was revealed. His eyes were filled with interest, and behind him was a young Taoist who looked 17 or 18 years old. However, just as the two of them came to the front of the Golden Gate, a clear light flashed, and a burly Taoist appeared. He looked down at Daoren with his hands behind his back, and said with a mocking tone, Chen Jiliang, why, are you still here this time? Is there no one in your Qinsong branch, and only you, the servant boy, are called here? Chen Jiliang heard this, but he was not angry. He laughed and said, so it is Doi Shangzhen. This old man is clumsy, but thanks to the ancestral master, I am a sect master, but I have not made many contributions. Now that I am here as an errand boy, I am making the best use of my abilities. Doi saw that Chen Jiliang mentioned the ancestral master, so he snorted and did not dare to say anything more, afraid that he would violate the taboo. Moreover, although Chen Jiliang was not the ancestral master's disciple, in terms of seniority, he was far ahead of him and was on the same level as the Dao masters. Doi did not dare to cross the line, so he glared at Chen Jiliang and left. The young Taoist spoke with his divine will, Uncle Master, this Dao sect master is a perfected master, but why does he not speak like a Taoist cultivator? Chen Jiliang said, that's not the case. His Yanghong branch is very particular about being straightforward, and it would be strange if he did not act like this. You see, he does not say anything in the past, and only suppresses it in his heart. Now that the Qinsong branch is going to be useless, he can't help but vent it out. The young Taoist said, are we really going to act according to the edict? But Uncle Master didn't say that he had never heard about this from the ancestral master. Moreover, even if there is such an edict, it is for the Qinshan branch. What does it have to do with the Qinsong branch? Chen Jiliang shook his head and led the young Taoist to their temporary lodging. Along the way, they bumped into other Taoists from time to time, and they greeted each other with cupped fists. However, Chen Jiliang could feel that everyone's attitude towards him had changed as the matter was about to happen. The young Taoist noticed it too, and he said angrily, it's a pity that the Qinsong branch lacks mystic stones, and it's hard for us to cross that hurdle. Until now, there is no Dao Master Zhenyang, or else this person would not be so rude. Back then, when the great underworld ancestral master established the chaotic domain, there were one or several branches that were passed down in each chaotic domain. In addition to the disciples of the ancestral master, there were hundreds of them. However, there were only 10 or so direct disciples of the ancestral master, and they were all led by the 3 orthodox sections. In fact, in terms of background, the Qinsong school was also a righteous sect, and they also had a chaotic domain behind them. However, until now, there was not a Tao Master Zhenyang in the school, so they could not speak, and because of this, they were even faintly ostracized by some sections. Not long after Qin Jiliang entered the palace, a messenger came and said, "Shang Zhenqin, Tao Master Miao Yu knows that you are here, and he invites you over for a chat." Chen Jiliang's expression turned serious, and he said, "Daoren will go now, please allow me to talk to Martial Nephew first." He walked to the side and said to the young Taoist, "Martial Nephew Qiao, today is different from the past. Tao Master Jichang is not here, Tao Master Miao Yu and Tao Master Luo Zhan do not like us, and they may find an excuse to find fault with me. If you encounter any problems, remember to be patient, and if there are any grievances, wait for me to come back." The young Taoist raised his hand and solemnly replied, "Martial uncle, don't worry, I know the severity." Qin Jiliang patted him and followed the messenger. After a while, the two of them came into the Golden Palace and saw Tao Master Miao Yu sitting on the high platform. He came up and bowed and said, "Tao Master, greetings." Tao Master Miao Yu looked down and said, "Qin Jiliang, do you know why I called you here?" Even in the face of the younger generation, because they were of the same lineage, he usually did not call them by their names. However, although Qin Jiliang was also the head of the Qinsong lineage in his eyes, he was just a boy beside the ancestral master, and could not be compared to the direct disciples, so his tone was not polite. Qin Jiliang did not care at all and said, "Daoren does not understand, please enlighten me." Tao Master Miao Yu said, "You should also know about the matter of the edict. Soon, the chaotic domain behind Qinsong will be connected to the place of fortune. This is the place where the ancestral master passed down the lineage, and it will be of great use to us, so we need your cooperation." Qin Jiliang bowed slightly and sighed. Tao Master also knows that after the 5 generations of the head of the Qinsong, no one has ascended to the upper domain. The talisman of the ancestral master has also dimmed, and it is obvious that the world behind it has been extinguished, and all the techniques have been used up. I'm afraid there is no inheritance, and it can no longer be connected to the upper and lower domain. Tao Master Miao Yu said expressionlessly, "How can I not know about this? It's just that you all ascended to the upper domain from that world. As long as you all are still here, follow this cause and effect, and you will eventually find the place of fortune. It doesn't matter if you can't do it, I will do it for you." Chen Jiliang's heart sank slightly, and he was about to say something, but Tao Master Miao Yu did not give him the chance to speak. He waved his sleeves and said, "Well, it's settled, go back and wait for the news." Chapter 2029. Qin Jiliang walked out of the Golden Palace. He had long known that the 2 Tao Masters had always been staring at the land of fortune behind the Black Tsong lineage. It was just that Tao Master Changji had protected them in the past, and it was not a critical moment, so they had never forced them. This time, it seemed that the 2 did not want to wait any longer. He did not know much about the edict, but if it was really the Patriarch's edict, why didn't he take it out and read it? If it was legitimate, then they would obey. Perhaps it was as Martial Nephew Qiao said, even if there was such an edict, it was for the Qingshan bloodline and not to control them. This was clearly using the Patriarch's name to embezzle the benefits of the Qinsong bloodline. If this was really the case, it was very likely that even the chaotic domain and the world behind it would be invaded. The Qinsong bloodline would no longer be able to act independently and could only be reduced to the same level as those small sects, subjugating others in disguise. This was absolutely unacceptable to him. He sighed in his heart. The cultivators of the Qinsong bloodline were weaker than others at the moment, not because of their lack of cultivation, but because they lacked the black stone. It was difficult for them to cross that threshold. This could not be helped. Even the 3 Tao Masters above could not have achieved what they had today if they did not have the black stone. However, from the secret slip left behind by the ancestral master, there was indeed a profound stone in the lower realms. They had already roughly deduced its approximate location, but the problem was that they were currently unable to take even half a step out of the celestial world. The chaotic domain was sometimes separated from the world they came from, and sometimes they were close. Only when the two worlds were connected could they return to where they came from. However, the Qinsong bloodline had only been passed down for a few generations. Ever since he ascended, the chaotic domain had always been close to the land of creation and had not reached it until now. Now that the door was about to open, he did not expect to be targeted by the two Tao masters at this time. Even though he was worried, he did not show it on his face. On the way back, he greeted the people he knew and returned to the temporary accommodation. The young Taoist came up and bowed. "Martial uncle?" Qin Jiliang asked. "Did anything happen after I left?" The young Taoist said, "No one came." Qin Jiliang stroked his beard and said, "None of the clans that were on good terms in the past came?" The young Taoist replied, "No." Qin Jiliang said, "Guard the palace gate for me. I have something to say to your Shifu." The young Taoist bowed. "Yes, Uncle Master." Qin Jiliang took out a ring from his sleeve and poured his mana into it. In the light, a blurry figure of a Taoist appeared. When he saw Qin Jiliang, he said, "Senior brother Qin, did my two senior brothers make things difficult for you?" Qin Jiliang sighed and said, "It's fine if he only wants to make things difficult for me, but this time, he clearly said that he wants me to help him obtain the land of fortune." The Taoist didn't seem to panic at all. His voice was still calm as he said, "So, they have made up their minds." Qin Jiliang nodded heavily. The Taoist said, "We are not at the end of the line yet. Senior brother Sun Yu left a talisman in the past. If we encounter any trouble, we can look for him. I originally didn't want to trouble him too much, but at this time, for the matter of the sect, I have no choice but to ask for his help." Qin Jiliang said, "Since junior brother can call upon Lord Ji Chang, then this matter can be slightly eased, but," the Taoist said, "but this method can only delay for a while. If the tribulation of void separation is real, then my two senior brothers will continue to target my Qinsong school. Therefore, we still need to think of a way ourselves. After the two realms are connected, I will personally go down to the lower realm and hope to be able to find that profound stone." Qin Jiliang sighed and said, "It's difficult. Even if we can delay it until the two realms are connected, junior brother can't find the profound stone in a hurry. Moreover, the two Taoists probably won't give us this chance." The Taoist said firmly, "Even if there is a slight possibility, we have to try." Qin Jiliang thought for a while and nodded. "All right, I don't know how the sect is doing in the lower realm now. Junior brother can go and take a look." The Taoist said, "In the past, I heard from Qingang that he has a disciple who has a vision and talent that is 100 times better than him. If he controls the sect, he will definitely be able to bring glory to Qinsong. If I can't achieve it, I can still entrust this thing to him after I find it, so that my Qinsong branch won't decline in my hands." At this moment, in the Taoist palace not far away, Dai Zhenren's burly body sat on a stone chair. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, a disciple walked over and looked up, asking in a deep voice, "How is it?" The disciple bowed and said, "Master, when Darenchen came out, he didn't show any expression and I couldn't see anything. However, I have inquired about it. The two Taoists have already ordered him to act according to the orders. So, it seems that the chaotic domain that they are at will be taken away." Dai Zhenren became spirited and said, "Good." He stood up, took 2 steps and said with a smile, "Good. In the past, Qinsong School relied on occupying a piece of chaotic domain to show that they are superior to me. When they lose their foothold, let's see if they can still be as arrogant as before." It was not that he coveted the chaotic domain because he knew very well that even if it was really taken away, he would not have a share. He just simply disliked Qinsong School. Among the hundreds of sects, some were inherited by the disciples of Timing Patriarch, and some were inherited by the Patriarch. However, no matter which branch it was, if there was no Taoist master in charge, almost all of them would look for the 3 orthodox sects to attach themselves to, which was the case with the Great Ocean sect. However, the Dark Azure sect had always been righteous and had never submitted to any great sect. Moreover, they occupied a vast expanse of chaotic domain all by themselves. This made Dai Zhenren very dissatisfied. Originally, without the true yang, everyone should have been in the same place as the light. Why was he an exception? If it was other sects, even if they didn't like him or were secretly dissatisfied with him, they would still maintain a friendly attitude on the surface. However, the Great Ocean sect needed to be straightforward. The more they followed their heart, the smoother their cultivation. Therefore, he never concealed his dislike for Qinsong school. He sat back on the stone chair and sneered, "With the two Taoists arranging things, I think in a few days, we will be able to visit the chaotic domain of Qinsong school." On the other side, Tao Master Miaoyu came to the Jade Palace and saw Tao Master Luozhan. He said, "Senior brother, I have seen Chen Jilyang and told him what should be said." Tao Master Luozhan nodded. The Yuzhong sect had never been servile or overbearing towards them, and they did not follow their orders like the other sections. Even so, he did not feel averse towards them. Instead, he admired their ambition and would usually give them some respect. However, whether or not this would cause his sect to treat the Yuzhong sect with more hostility was out of his control. But no matter what, only Tao Master Zhenyang had the right to speak. Therefore, he didn't ask Chen Jilyang if he agreed to this matter. Because in this matter, the attitude of Qinsong school didn't matter at all. He said in a deep voice that Yuan Zhongzi is our junior brother after all. Don't embarrass him too much. If we can successfully occupy the place of creation, we can also leave the chaotic domain for him. Do you two still remember that he is from the same sect? As this voice came out, the two suddenly found a tall Taoist standing in front of the steps. Tao Master Luozhan quickly stood up and bowed respectfully. He said, "Senior brother, you have come out of seclusion?" Taoist Sun Yu said calmly, "If I didn't come out, what were you going to do? Plot against your fellow sect members?" Tao Master Miao Yu hurriedly explained, "Senior brother, you have wronged us. We are acting according to Master's orders. Moreover, we are not acting out of selfishness. We are also thinking about the sect passed down by the ancestral master. If we don't have that place of creation, we won't be able to protect the sky leaving tribulation." Taoist Sun Yu looked at him and said, "The imperial edict only said that the place of creation can be used as shelter. When did it say that we can't avoid it if we don't have that place? Could it be that the place behind us is not the place of creation?" Tao Master Miao Yu said, "But senior brother, according to the imperial edict, the place behind us is not as good as that place." Taoist Sun Yu said, "If that is the case, then we might as well invite junior brother Yuan Zhongzi to come here and let him know about the imperial edict. If he invites us to avoid the tribulation, we will gladly go. If he doesn't mention it, then we will find our own way. There is no need to do such a shameful thing." Tao Master Miao Yu immediately fell silent. Now, they could use the imperial edict as an excuse to threaten Qinsong. But if they showed it to him, how could they obediently obey their arrangements? Even if they could forcefully suppress it, it would be too unsightly. Taoist Sun Yu saw that they were all silent, and his tone softened a little. "Two junior brothers, the chaotic domain and the thing behind it are the opportunity that Master left for Qinsong, and it is also junior brother Yuan Zhongzi's opportunity. As senior brother, how can you and I, instead of protecting it, covet junior brother's things? We can't do this. Think about it carefully later." As he spoke, his figure flickered and disappeared. Tao Master Miao Yu turned his head and said, "Senior brother?" Tao Master Luozhan remained silent. Tao Master Miao Yu said, "Senior brother Sun Yu only came with an incarnation. He is still in the closed door. If we wait now," Tao Master Luozhan shook his head and said helplessly, "But since senior brother has already spoken, how can we refuse him? If we quarrel among ourselves, it will be a joke to others. Let's leave it at that for now." Even though Sun Yu only came with an incarnation this time, he had already made his attitude clear. If the three of them had a disagreement, the people below would not know what to do. At this moment, a woman's figure appeared above the palace gate. She bowed and said, "Tao Master, there's movement on the altar." When Tao Master Miao Yu heard this, he seemed to have thought of something and said, "Senior brother, could it be?" Taoist Luozhan stretched out his hand to stop him from continuing. He said, "I'll go take a look. Junior brother, wait for me here." Tao Master Miao Yu agreed. Tao Master Luozhan's figure flickered and disappeared. After a long time, he turned back. However, the expression on his face was very different from before. He said slowly, "Junior brother, there's news about the last disciple of the patriarch." Dao Master Miao Yu was slightly surprised and said, "Oh? What news?" Dao Master Luo Zhan smiled and said, "Our little junior brother has already achieved the spirit refinement Dao fruit not long ago. It's just that he is still in seclusion. Just now, he has passed his will to me. As long as my chaotic domain connects to his place, he can come over. If he comes, he will naturally be in charge of the creation heavens. I believe senior brother Sun Yu will have nothing to say at that time." Chapter 2030. The lineages passed down by the great underworld patriarch, as well as the sects established by some disciples, were mostly located in the 4 great chaotic domains. Each chaotic domain was connected to a modern world. Therefore, the 4 great sects, including the Qinsong school, actually originated from different modern worlds. However, because the great underworld patriarch Weili could travel between the chaotic domains, it protected them, but it also prevented them from leaving. In fact, under normal circumstances, there was no need for this. The chaotic domain was vast and boundless, and there were no external disturbances. On the surface, there was no need to ask about other places. But after all, this was not a true place of fortune. Although cultivators had all the external medicines for ordinary cultivation, there was a lack of external medicines to reach the upper realm. Fortunately, the chaotic domain was not completely closed off. On the day when it was connected to the modern world, it would naturally be connected to other realms. Luo Zhan and Miao Yu had been waiting for this moment since they received the news that day. More than 10 days passed in a flash. In the two's perception, the world around them suddenly extended, as if it had expanded thousands of times in an instant. How could they not know that the chaotic domain's gateway was finally connected to the world behind it? With a thought, the two of them arrived before an altar that occupied a vast area. They could see that there was already a light screen floating in the air above the altar. Unlike the Qinsong school, they had previously had the experience of traveling with the modern world behind it. Therefore, they had built this altar long ago. Every time the 2 realms were connected, this gateway would automatically open. Originally, after the light curtain opened, it would only maintain its original state, but now it was getting brighter and brighter. Wisps of qi overflowed from it, stirring the wind and clouds in the chaotic domain. For some reason, the brilliance on it seemed to be distorted at this moment. The 2 of them had already realized what was about to happen. Although they looked normal on the surface and were still standing steadily, it seemed that no matter how intense the changes were, they would not be able to shake their state of mind. However, in the depths of their eyes, there was clearly a trace of admiration and respect. After a short moment, the light abruptly collapsed inward, forming a vortex. A dazzling rainbow appeared out of thin air, descending upon the altar before spreading in all directions. When the light slowly dispersed, a purple-robed young Taoist who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old could be seen standing there. His long eyebrows were raised and his eyes were bright. The patterns on his clothes had waves, the sun, the moon, and the land. However, at a glance, these were not decorations. They really did exist, as if the various worlds were accompanying him. After Luo Zhan and Miao Yu sensed this person's qi activity, they couldn't help but stagnate, and even their minds trembled. This was the innate reverence they had towards the Weili. This was the first time they had felt the pressure of the upper realm. Ever since they had reached the true yang stage, they had never felt so weak. It was as if they were incomparably small in front of this person, like ants. For a moment, they were unable to speak. After a while, the qi activity seemed to be restrained by the other party, and finally disappeared. Just now, the 2 of them had broken free from the heavy pressure. They stepped forward and bowed, saying, "Greetings, Grand Elder." The young Taoist looked down and said, "Senior brothers, you're too polite. We're all from the same sect, there's no need to be so polite." Luo Zhan and Miao Yu could feel that although the other party's words were polite, there was actually a sense of indifference and alienation, and he didn't seem to have any intention of correcting the way they addressed him. This was normal. Other than being from the same sect, there was actually no friendship between them. However, this was enough. According to the edict, the other party would naturally help them avoid the calamity of leaving the sky. Dao Master Luo Zhan bowed again and said, "Grand Elder, please bestow your Dao name, so that we can announce it to all the sections." If the Grand Elder went to a place, if he was willing, then the living beings in that place would know his name and worship him. However, Hun Tian was different, because this place was created by the great underworld patriarch, and there was a Weili left behind by him, so other people's Weili couldn't make it public. Just like the 3 true Yang cultivators here, they originally had the ability to use things to benefit themselves, but in this place, they couldn't make anyone follow their own will. The young Taoist said, "My Dao name is Xian Che. Senior brothers, please remember it." Luo Zhan and Miao Yu bowed again. Taoist Xian Che didn't have the intention to talk about their friendship and directly asked, "How's the preparation for the land of creation?" Dao Master Miao Yu said, "That place has always been in the hands of Teacher's sect. Now that we've already informed them, it shouldn't affect the Grand Elder's plan." Taoist Xian Che said, "This is Teacher's order, it's not my personal matter. The calamity of leaving the sky this time is very important, and only the land of creation can protect it. Not only is it related to senior brothers, but it is also related to the inheritance of Teacher's various sections. There can't be any mistakes, and I believe that senior brothers will be able to arrange it properly." Dao Master Luo Zhan said, "Don't worry, Grand Elder, there won't be any mistakes." Taoist Xian Che said good, and his gaze swept across, saying, "I remember there's still senior brother Sun Yu. Where is he? Why didn't he come to see me?" Dao Master Miao Yu replied, "Senior brother Sun Yu is in seclusion, so it's difficult for him to welcome Grand Elder. If Grand Elder wants to see him, we can invite him over." Dao Master Luo Zhan frowned slightly, but he didn't say anything. Taoist Xian Che waved his sleeve and said expressionlessly, "Then let him go into seclusion, there's no need to summon him, after all, cultivation is more important." Dao Master Luo Zhan sighed in his heart and cupped his hands, saying, "Grand Elder, the various sects that Teacher has passed down are all here now, and there are a few of them who are our fellow disciples. Grand Elder, do you want to meet them?" Taoist Xian Che looked at him and said indifferently, "All right." Luo Zhan and Miao Yu left, and at the same time, they sent a message to the sect masters of the various sects, saying that a disciple of the ancestral master had reached the spirit refinement realm, and now that he had come to this chaotic domain, the calamity of leaving the sky mentioned in the message should not be difficult to resolve, and they wanted them to come and pay their respects. Qin Jiliang also heard about this very quickly, and his heart sank. Originally, with Taoist Master Sun Yu coming to mediate, he thought that this matter could be delayed, and that the Qinsong sect still had time to make arrangements. But he never expected that the Spirit Refinement Realm's Grand Elder would actually come. Although he didn't know how powerful this expert was, he knew that in front of such a great Weili, all schemes were useless. This time, even Taoist Master Sun Yu couldn't help them. However, he still had to inform the sect about this matter, and he took out the silver ring and activated it again, and then realized that no matter how much magic energy he poured into it, there was no reaction. Immediately, he knew that the 2 Dao Masters must have concealed the heavenly secret, and they obviously didn't want to give Qinsong any chance. At this time, the young Taoist walked in and said, "Martial Uncle, Doi Shangjin wants to see you." Qin Jiliang snorted and said, "He's here to see Qinsong's sect become a joke." The young Taoist said, "Then disciple will ask him to leave." Qin Jiliang waved his hand and said, "There's no need, go and invite him in. No matter what happens to him, we will naturally uphold the righteous path." After a while, Doi Shangjin walked in and said, "Qin Jiliang, the Grand Elder has arrived, why don't you go and pay your respects?" Qin Jiliang was surprised and said, "Doi Shangjin, don't you know that I'm just a child who serves the ancestral master? How can I mingle with all of you? Wouldn't this stain the Grand Elder's eyes and ears?" Doi Shangjin snorted and said, "You're smart, but once the Grand Elder is here, I'm afraid your Qinsong sect will end here, right?" Qin Jiliang, however, didn't get angry, and said while stroking his beard, "The changes of the world, even the almighties of the upper realm can't know everything. Who knows what will happen?" Doi Shangzhen sneered. He thought that Qin Jiliang was just being stubborn, and thought to himself, "Let's see if you can still be so stubborn in the future." The chaotic void domain was the place where the previous Taoists of Qinsong School lived. It could be seen that the scenery here was very similar to the layout of the sect that Grandmaster Tai Ming personally set up in the 9 continents. The third-generation sect Master Yuan Zhongzi was sitting cross-legged on a celestial palace, and he was staring at a dark sundial in front of him. According to his previous calculations, in at most 2 to 3 days, the chaotic void domain would connect with the place of creation, and then he would be able to borrow the portal between the 2 realms to go to the realm above. Now that there was no movement in the outer realm, it seemed that Sun Yu's appearance played a role, but he had a bad feeling in his heart, but he didn't know where it came from. His expression was solemn, and he thought, "Seems like I have to act in advance." Now, although the chaotic void domain had not completely connected with the place of creation, he had a ferry passed down by the Grandmaster with him. With this item, before the 2 realms were truly connected, he could cross the portal in advance and reach that place. However, this was extremely dangerous, because this ferry was originally used in times of crisis. If something went wrong, he would be lost in the void realm, and maybe he would be trapped in it forever. However, in order to prevent the Qinsong School from being manipulated by others, he had to take this risk. Moreover, he used his mana to calculate, and he felt that there was a chance of survival in the path ahead of Qinsong School, and there was a high possibility of success. After making the decision, he waved his sleeve and left a letter, stating his destination. The reason why he didn't say it was to guard against Luo Zhan and Miao Yu, lest they sensed it. He waved his sleeve and was about to summon the flying fairy, but at this moment, his movement stopped. He turned his head and saw a Taoist with black hair and a long beard standing there. He bowed and said, "I didn't know that senior brother was here. Junior brother greets you." Tao Venerable Luo Zhan said in a deep voice, "Junior brother, where are you going?" Yuan Zhongzi sighed softly and said, "Senior brother, why do you ask when you already know the answer?" Tao Venerable Luo Zhan took a few steps forward and said, "Junior brother, just now, teacher's last disciple has arrived from beyond the heavens." He paused and said in a serious tone, "This junior brother of ours is extremely talented, and he has already achieved the spirit cultivation Tao fruit." Yuan Zhongzi's expression was calm, and he nodded and said, "The 2 senior brothers have always valued senior brother Sun Yu's words. If not, why would senior brother come personally? In this case, my Qinsong School has no other choice." Tao Venerable Luo Zhan looked at him and said, "Junior brother, it's good that you can understand. That place of fortune is of great importance, and it is beneficial to all the schools that teacher has passed down. You, Qinsong, hand over this place, and many of your fellow disciples will naturally owe you a favor. When little junior brother arrives, I don't need you to do anything to Qinsong, I just need to sit at the side and watch. I hope that you and the others will behave yourselves, and we won't lose our friendship as fellow disciples." After saying that, his entire body turned into specks of light and disappeared. Yuan Zhongzi looked around and found that he was trapped here, and he couldn't get out. He pondered for a moment and walked to the side of the table. His gaze fell on the pool that resembled the great pool of Dragon Abyss. He pondered and said, "Since the survival of my Yutsong sect isn't in my place, where should it be?" Chapter 2031. Outside the pavilion where Yuan Zhongzi resided, a few Qinshan sect disciples were waiting outside. When they saw Tao Venerable Luo Zhan walking out on a cloud, they came up and bowed, saying, "Tao Venerable." Tao Master Luo Zhan looked down at the Qinsong branch's encampment and said, "Go." The disciples bowed and immediately flew in different directions. Then they spread out the decrees and read them out loud. The Tao Master has decreed that the Grand Supreme will visit the chaotic void realm in the next few days. All Qinsong School disciples are to stay in their positions and are not to be summoned. Do not take half a step outside the sect without permission, lest you offend the carriage. The Tao Master's words were law. Aside from the spiritual masters who ascended from the Qinsong branch, there were also disciples who joined the sect later. There were also some powerful cultivators who had severed their mortal bodies. But when they heard the decree, they immediately felt that they couldn't go anywhere else. Their activities were restricted to their own cave abodes. Some elders tried to activate the restrictions to escape, but found that it was useless. Not to mention the cave abodes restrictions, even the Qinsong branch's protective formation was useless to a true yang cultivator. He could destroy it with a single thought. Ever since the Qinsong school established itself in the chaotic void realm, it was the first time they were bullied like this. But the other party was a true yang Dao master. His magic power wasn't something they could resist. Not only that, but the Grand Supreme Dao ancestor was also involved. The powerful cultivators in the sect all knew how powerful he was, so they could only remain silent. Some disciples were furious, but they couldn't resist. Dao Master Luozhan looked at this scene expressionlessly. Originally, they needed the people from the Qinsong school, especially the mortal metamorphosis cultivators who ascended to the higher realms. Only then could they follow the karma and find the land of fortune behind them. But now that there was a spirit refinement cultivator like Taoist Xianche, there was naturally no need to do so. It didn't matter if the people from the Qinsong school were there or not. Now that he didn't want them to come out and get in the way, it was fine as long as they didn't come out and get in the way. With a thought, he brought his disciples back to the clear sync chaotic realm. He ordered the disciples to disperse and went to the Golden Palace. Miaoyu Dao Master was in front of the steps of the Golden Palace at the moment. Seeing him return, he came up and bowed, asking, "Senior brother, how is it?" Dao Venerate Luozhan said, "Junior brother Yuan Zhongzi has been imprisoned in my residence. Until this matter is resolved, he won't come and disturb us anymore." Dao Master Miaoyu said, "That's good. We are doing this for the sake of the others, lest they anger the Grand Supreme on impulse. At that time, they will understand our good intentions." Dao Lord Luozhan looked at him, but didn't reply. No matter what, their goal all this while had been to snatch the land of fortune in the hands of the Qinsong bloodline. They could make such pompous claims to the outside world, but both of them knew exactly what was going on here, so there was no need to say such things. He asked, "Is the Grand Supreme here?" Dao Master Miaoyu said, "He is still in the Golden Palace. I will go with senior brother to meet him." Dao Master Luozhan grunted, then went to the palace with Dao Master Miaoyu. When they arrived at the hall, they bowed and said, "Greetings, Grand Supreme." Taoist Xianche had stayed in the Golden Palace for several days and had seen almost all of the Tao teachings of the great underworld patriarch. When he saw the two, he said, "Senior brothers, you came at the right time. I was just looking for you." Dao Master Luozhan said, "Does the Grand Supreme have any instructions?" Taoist Xianche said, "In order to deal with the void separation tribulation, I need to connect all the land of fortune, not just the void chaotic realm. Senior brothers, you need to hand over the seal of the chaotic realm to me." Every clan that controlled the chaotic realm had a seal of the chaotic realm, which was also the proof of their control over the realm. Luozhan and Miaoyu were the masters of the chaotic realm, so they naturally had a seal of the chaotic realm. When Dao Master Miaoyu heard this, he immediately frowned and said, "May I ask the Grand Supreme, isn't the seal of the void separation realm enough this time?" Taoist Xianche's expression was indifferent as he said, "How could the void separation tribulation be so simple? Every land of fortune is a way out. I'm sure that both of you have seen the contents of the Imperial Edict, so you should be clear about what it says." Dao Master Miaoyu still wanted to say something, but Dao Master Luozhan beat him to it and said, "Since it is useful to the Grand Supreme, we will definitely hand it over." Taoist Xianche said, "Then do it as soon as possible." After Luozhan and Miaoyu bowed, they retreated. When Dao Master Miaoyu was outside, he said, "Senior brother, this..." Dao Master Luozhan said, "I know what you want to say, junior brother, but what the Grand Supreme said is reasonable. According to the oracle, he should be in charge of all the chaotic realms and the land of fortune, so it is reasonable for him to ask me for the seal. Moreover, the Grand Supreme is high and mighty, so why would he fight with us for anything? It is just a seal, so what if it is gone? Are you afraid that he will take your position as the sect master? Dao Master Miaoyu also knew that since this junior brother had spoken, then he could not disobey. Even though he was dissatisfied, it was not good for him to show it. Moreover, these words could be considered to have persuaded him. He said, "We can take out the seal, but what about senior brother Sunyu? He will definitely not take it out." Dao Master Luo Zhan thought for a moment, then sighed and said, "I will go and talk to him. The power of the Grand Supreme is not something we can resist. Even if we insist, it will be useless. I think senior brother Sun Yu should understand this." Dao Master Luo Zhan immediately went to the place where Dao Master Sun Yu was cultivating in seclusion, but he managed to persuade the latter on the same day. On the second day, the two of them came to the hall with 3 seals and said, "The seals of our 3 chaotic realms are here, and there is one more seal in the hands of the Qinsong bloodline. Does the Grand Supreme want us to go and take it?" Taoist Xian Che looked at the seal for a moment, then he put it away. He said, "There is no need. I am going to the Dark Void realm to take control of the Land of Fortune, so I will just take it on the way." Dao Master Luo Zhan said, "When does the Grand Supreme plan to go there?" Taoist Xian Che said, "There's no time to lose. I've already calculated that the Dark Void realm will be connected to the Land of Creation in a day or 2. If we rush there tomorrow, we'll be able to take over this place." Usually, only the master of the chaotic realm would know when a chaotic realm would be connected to the Land of Fortune behind it, but it was no secret to the great experts of the God Refinement realm. On the second day, Taoist Xian Che led the 2 Dao masters, Luo Zhan and Miao Yu, as well as the masters of the various bloodlines to the Dark Void realm. As a member of the Qinsong bloodline, Chen Jiliang was also brought along this time. There were originally domain gates between the 4 chaotic realms. If there was a true Yang cultivator in a chaotic realm, they could close the gate. Even the Grand Supreme of the God Refinement realm might not be able to find it immediately. However, no one in the Qinsong bloodline had reached this realm, so they were not obstructed in the slightest. After Taoist Xian Che arrived at the chaotic realm, he had already brought everyone to the top of the Qinsong bloodline's encampment. He saw an altar at first glance. It was undoubtedly built by the Qinsong school to pass through the realm gate when the 2 realms were connected. He said, "Wait here." Everyone behind him bowed and said yes. Taoist Xian Che descended. The location chosen by the Qinsong bloodline was just right, so he did not plan to change it. The 2 realms were connected, but the gate would not be naturally connected. It still needed the magic power of a great expert to open it. He walked up and silently calculated for a moment. It was the same as what he had calculated earlier. Now was the right time. He focused his mind, and under everyone's gazes, a spiritual light flickered on the altar. Then, like ripples on water, a light screen suddenly appeared in the air. In a split second, it covered half of the sky, and the incomparably dazzling aura caused the area where everyone was standing to dim down. Although some of the cultivators with profound cultivation in the Qinsong school could not see it with their own eyes, they could feel that the gate between the 2 realms had been opened. Their hearts sank unconsciously. Some of the more straightforward elders gritted their teeth and continuously used their magic power to crash against the seal again and again, trying to break through it. However, it was useless. The seal was just like the day when Venerable Zhenyang arrived. It was unshakable and unshakable. Chen Jiliang's heart was incomparably heavy when he saw this scene from behind. He closed his eyes and no longer looked at it. He only sighed heavily. Before the spirit refinement Weili, he really could not think of any way to salvage the situation. It seemed that the Qinsong bloodline's foundation had been robbed. However, at this moment, Taoist Xian Che, who was standing in front of the gate between the 2 realms, revealed a hint of astonishment. Because the gate that appeared just now wasn't opened by him. Right when he was circulating his magic power, it opened on its own. It was obvious that someone had come from the other side. His expression calmed down. This was where the Qinsong bloodline was located, so it might be someone else who had ascended here. This was fine. It was convenient for him to connect the 2 realms and go to that Land of Fortune. However, at this moment, A five-colored brilliance suddenly shone from the gate. Including the two true yang cultivators, Luo Zhan and Miao Yu, they only took a glance at the brilliance and felt as if their consciousness had frozen. Their aura, magic power, and mind were unable to circulate. At this moment, Taoist Xianche's expression also changed slightly. He seemed to have sensed that something was wrong. He immediately stretched out his hand and tried to close the gate. Boom! Just as the gate was about to change under his magic power, a boundless Weili forcefully stopped it. At the same time, a vast and boundless Weili arrived. Just the shockwaves from the collision alone caused the entire chaotic regions to tremble. Not only that, the four great chaotic regions and the worlds behind them also shook. This scene that resembled a heavenly tribulation terrified everyone present. They almost suspected that the void-leaving tribulation had arrived ahead of time. Taoist Xianche's expression changed. He retreated far away and looked at the rainbow as if he was facing a great enemy. As if tens of thousands of years had passed, a young Taoist dressed in a black robe slowly stepped out of the endless screen of spiritual light. As his sleeves fluttered, boundless profound energy spread out and spread outwards. Just by standing there, it seemed as if the entire world was covered by him. When Luo Zhan and Miao Yu saw this person, they clearly felt the same feeling they had when they first saw Taoist Xianche. However, the other party's Weili was far more magnificent and vast than before. If they could still feel it then, now, they couldn't even sense his emotions or distinguish external objects. At this moment, the only remaining trace of consciousness was only aware that they still existed in this world. Taoist Xianche was shocked to find that he couldn't see through anything in front of this person. No matter how much of his magic power surged, it seemed to sink into a bottomless abyss. There was no response. He said with incomparable solemnity, "Who are you, sir?" The young Taoist glanced at him, then looked around. In an instant, he saw all the past and future changes in this place and learned everything he wanted to know from this junior. He stood on the altar with his sleeves behind his back, profound energy soaring behind him. He said indifferently, "Qinsong School, rumble." Thunder rumbled in the chaotic regions that had never changed since time immemorial, causing everyone's hearts to tremble. Hall Master Du Jin. The sound of thunder lingered in the distance. Only his voice still reverberated in the sky. Zhang Yan. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.